He said I'd be nothing without him as he slammed the door on our 3-year relationship and my dreams. Now, 5 years later, Nathan Taylor stands in my company's lobby, resume in hand, unaware that the CEO he's desperate to impress is me. The irony isn't lost on me as I watch him through the security feed, nervously adjusting his tie, rehearsing what I assume is his perfectly practiced pitch. Ms. Chen, are you sure you want to take this meeting personally? Emma, my executive assistant, stands in the doorway of my office, concern etched across her face. I can have HR handle it like any other applicant. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I take a sip of my espresso, savoring the bitter taste that matches the memory of Nathan's parting words. You'll never make it in this industry, Olivia. You're too soft, too idealistic. This business will eat you alive without someone like me to guide you. No, I tell Emma, setting down my cup with deliberate precision. I'll handle this one myself. The penthouse office of Ascendant Technologies offers a panoramic view of the Seattle skyline, the Space Needle piercing the morning fog like an exclamation point on my success story. Below, 60 floors of innovation and excellence, all built from the ground up after Nathan had crushed my initial startup dreams under the heel of his designer shoes. Emma hesitates, her tablet clutched to her chest. He's been waiting for nearly an hour. Good, I reply, smoothing my Armani suit jacket. Let him wait another 20 minutes, then send him in. She nods, understanding the unstated message. In business, timing is everything, a lesson Nathan had once lorded over me. Today, it's my turn to control the clock. I return to my desk, reviewing the quarterly reports that cement Ascendant as the fastest-growing tech company in the Pacific Northwest. Our revolutionary AI-driven security software has made us the darling of both government agencies and private sector clients. The press has dubbed me the Phantom Innovator, a nod to my preference for working behind the scenes, letting my products speak for themselves. What they don't know is that my aversion to publicity stemmed from those early days after Nathan, when I feared his connections would blackball me if he saw my name attached to any venture. That fear has long since transformed into a strategic advantage, an air of mystery that has only enhanced our brand. My phone buzzes with a text from Marcus, my head of security and one of the few people who knows my full history with Nathan. Subject appears nervous. Checked watch 17 times in last 10 minutes, sweating profusely. I allow myself a small smile. Nathan always did perspire when anxious, a tell I'd pointed out during his presentations to potential investors. He'd dismissed my observation then, calling it irrelevant amateur psychology. Now, it's just another data point in my assessment of his current desperate state. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. At precisely 10:50 a.m., 20 minutes after our scheduled meeting time, I send Emma the signal. As I stand to position myself for his entrance, I catch my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. At 35, I'm at the peak of my powers. Confident, successful, and completely self-made. The woman staring back at me bears little resemblance to the naive 27-year-old who'd once believed Nathan's promises of partnership and support. The door opens, and Nathan walks in, his eyes initially fixed on the marble floor before rising to meet mine. The recognition is instantaneous. Shock, disbelief, and something else flickering across his face. Fear, perhaps. Or shame. Possibly both. Olivia? My name emerges as a whisper, the color draining from his face. Nathan, I acknowledge coolly, not offering my hand. It's been a while. He stands frozen, the expensive but slightly outdated suit hanging on his frame suggesting recent weight loss. The confident stride that once carried him through boardrooms has been replaced by hesitant steps, You're the CEO of Ascendant Technologies? The question tumbles out, his voice cracking slightly. Founder and CEO, I correct him, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. Please have a seat. As he sinks into the chair, I notice the tattered edges of his leather portfolio, a detail that speaks volumes about his current circumstances. The Nathan I knew would never allow anything in his possession to appear worn or dated. I had no idea, he begins, fumbling with his resume, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. When I applied for the VP of Operations position, You assumed you'd be meeting with someone else, I finish for him, taking the document from his unsteady grasp. Someone who didn't know that you once told your colleague I was just a pretty face with mediocre coding skills. His eyes widen. At the quote, a memory from our shared past when he'd thought I wasn't within earshot. Olivia, that was years ago. I was different then. I was successful, I suggest, scanning his resume with clinical detachment. Arrogant? Convinced of your own infallibility? The air conditioning hums softly in the background, filling the silence as Nathan struggles to find his footing. Through the windows behind me, storm clouds gather over Elliott Bay, mirroring the tension in the room. I've changed, he finally says, his voice smaller than I've ever heard it. Have you? I set his resume aside, leaning forward. Because your employment history tells an interesting story, Nathan. 3 companies in 5 years, each position less prestigious than the last. He shifts uncomfortably. The market has been challenging. TechVision's collapse wasn't my fault. The founder made some questionable decisions. Yes, I'm well aware of Daniel Reeves's missteps, I reply, letting him hear that I'm intimately familiar with the industry gossip. Just as I'm aware that you were the one who convinced him to ignore cybersecurity vulnerabilities in favor of faster product launches. Nathan's jaw tightens. This is clearly not the interview he prepared for. You seem to have followed my career closely. I make it my business to know the players in my industry, especially those with a history of prioritizing short-term gains over long-term stability. I lean back in my chair, studying him. Tell me, Nathan, why should I hire someone who's presided over 3 failed projects in half a decade? His Adam's apple bobs as he swallows hard. Because I've learned from those mistakes. I understand now what I couldn't see then. He pauses, hands clasped tightly in his lap. And because I was once right about something important, even if I expressed it poorly. And what's that? I ask, genuinely curious about what defense he might mount. That this industry is brutal. It does eat people alive. His eyes meet mine, steady for the first time since he entered. But I was wrong about you being too soft. You're steel wrapped in silk. I just couldn't see it then. The compliment, if it is one, lands awkwardly between us. 5. Years ago, such words from him would have meant everything. Now, they feel like cheap currency offered too late. Interesting assessment, I say, my tone neutral. But I'm more interested in your technical qualifications. Your resume claims expertise in AI implementation, yet your last position at Novatech showed significant delays in their machine learning rollout. Nathan straightens, professional instincts kicking in. The delays were due to integration issues with legacy systems. I actually advised a complete overhaul, but management opted for a patchwork solution. He pauses. I have the documentation to prove it, if you're interested. I am, I reply, though we both know my interest extends beyond professional curiosity. Part of me wants to see how he handles being questioned, being doubted, the very things he never tolerated from me. He reaches into his portfolio, producing a folder of technical specifications and recommendation memos. As he walks me through his proposals, I recognize the analytical mind that once impressed me. Despite everything, Nathan was always brilliantly technical, seeing patterns and solutions where others saw only problems. These are solid recommendations, I acknowledge, setting the folder aside. but they don't address my primary concern. Which is? He asks, a hint of his old confidence returning. Trust, I state simply. How can I trust someone who once betrayed his partner both professionally and personally? The word betrayal lands like a physical blow. Nathan flinches, his gaze dropping to his hands. I didn't see it that way then, he admits softly. I thought I was being realistic, protecting myself from what I saw as inevitable failure. My failure, I clarify, the old wound still tender despite my success. Yes, he acknowledges. I was wrong, obviously, catastrophically wrong. Outside, rain begins to patter against the windows, the sky darkening further. Emma appears in the doorway with a subtle sign. My next meeting is approaching. I signal for 5 more minutes. What happened, Nathan? I ask, curiosity finally overcoming my professional detachment. The last I heard, you were leading development at TechVision, with stock options and a corner office. He laughs without humor, running a hand through hair that's grayer than I remember. Pride, overconfidence, bad investments, the usual tragic story. He sighs. TechVision failed because I pushed too hard for market share without solidifying our foundation. Novatech downsized after the merger, and Stellaris, well, let's just say my reputation preceded me. And now you're here, I observe, applying for a position with a company that surpassed all of your previous employers combined. The irony isn't lost on me, he admits, but I'm not here for redemption or out of desperation. Well, not entirely. He straightens, meeting my gaze directly. I'm here because Ascendant is doing revolutionary work, and I still have valuable skills to offer. The fact that you're the one evaluating those skills is unexpected. I consider him for a long moment, weighing the history between us against the potential value he might bring to Ascendant. The technical expertise outlined in his resume is impressive, despite his recent career setbacks. Part of me, a part I'm not entirely comfortable acknowledging, wonders what it would be like to have Nathan working under my direction, subject to my approval, dependent on my goodwill. The position you've applied for is already filled, I inform him, watching his face fall. We promoted from within last week. I see, he says, reaching for his portfolio, defeat evident in the slump of his shoulders. Well, thank you for your time, Olivia. It was illuminating to see you again. However, I continue, we do have an opening in our AI security division. It's a step down from VP, project manager level, but it would allow you to work directly with the technology. The compensation is still competitive. Hope flickers across his face, quickly tempered by caution. And you'd be willing to consider me for that role, despite our history? I press a button on my desk phone. Emma, please send in Marcus with the security division package. Within moments, Marcus enters, his imposing frame filling the doorway. He hands me a tablet with the job description and compensation details, giving Nathan a coolly professional nod that doesn't quite mask his protective instincts. Marcus oversees all security operations, I explain, passing the tablet to Nathan. If you accept this position, you'll report directly to him. Nathan skims the document, his eyebrows rising slightly at the salary figure. Generous, but significantly less than what he would have earned as VP. This is unexpected, he says carefully. As was this entire meeting, I remind him. The question is, can you adapt to unexpected circumstances? Can you work effectively in a support role rather than a leadership position? Can you follow direction from others, including those you once dismissed? The challenge in my voice is unmistakable. We both know I'm asking if he can work for me. The woman he said would be nothing without him. Nathan takes a deep breath, considering the tablet in his hands. 5 years ago, I would have walked out of this office rather than accept a demotion. He looks up, meeting my gaze. But I'd like to think I've gained some perspective since then. This role aligns with my technical strengths, and the project itself is fascinating. And the reporting structure? I press. You'd be 4 levels below the executive team. Including you, he acknowledges. Yes, I understand the hierarchy. I exchange a glance with Marcus, who gives a subtle nod. Despite his protective instincts, he recognizes talent when he sees it. The position requires a 90-day probationary period, I inform Nathan, during which time your performance will be closely monitored. One hint of the old Nathan Taylor, the arrogance, the undermining of colleagues, the credit stealing, and, "You're out." "Understood," he says, his voice steady. I accept those terms. I stand, signaling the end of our meeting. Marcus will walk you through the paperwork and security protocols. You'll start next Monday. Nathan rises, extending his hand. After a moment's hesitation, I shake it, the contact brief and professional. Thank you for this opportunity, Olivia. I won't let you down. See that you don't, I reply coolly. Because this time, I'm the one who decides your future. As Marcus leads Nathan from my office, Emma appears with my schedule for the remainder of the day. Through the glass walls, I watch Nathan's retreating form, his shoulders straighter now, purpose restored to his step. Are you sure about this? Emma asks quietly, concern evident in her tone. No, I admit. But sometimes the best way to neutralize a potential threat is to keep it close and contained. She nods, understanding the strategy if not fully agreeing with it. The board meeting is in 30 minutes. Do you want me to brief them on the new hire? No, I decide. Nathan Taylor is a non-event as far as the board is concerned, just another mid-level project manager joining the team. As Emma leaves to prepare for the meeting, I turn back to the rain-streaked windows, watching the storm roll across the city. I've made a calculated risk, bringing Nathan into my carefully constructed world. Part of me wonders if it's business, strategy, or something more personal, a desire to show him, day by day, what he walked away from, what he could have been part of. The thought is uncomfortable, suggesting I'm not as immune to our history as I'd like to believe. I push it aside, focusing instead on the empire I've built without him, the success I've achieved on my own terms. Whatever Nathan's presence brings to Ascendant, good or ill, I'm prepared for it. I've weathered worse storms than a ghost from my past seeking redemption. My phone buzzes with a text from Marcus. Paperwork started. Subject asked about reporting structure. Confirmed he knows the boundaries. I smile slightly, typing back. Keep him on a short leash. First sign of trouble, you have full authority. Marcus's response is immediate. Understood, boss. I've got your back. And that, I reflect as I gather my materials for the board meeting, is the fundamental difference between my life then and now. I'm no longer alone, no longer the naive entrepreneur desperate for validation. I've built not just a company, but a fortress of loyal people who believe in my vision and protect my interests. Nathan may have walked into my company, but he's entered a world where I set the rules. And rule number 1 is simple. No one undermines Olivia Chen. Not anymore. Not ever again. The first week of Nathan's employment passes uneventfully. According to Marcus's daily reports, he's been punctual, professional, and surprisingly humble, accepting direction from colleagues with none of the resistance I expected. He's actually quite popular with the technical team, Marcus admits during our Friday security briefing. Solved a major encryption issue that had them stumbling for weeks. I nod, unsurprised by Nathan's technical prowess. That was never in question. It's his interpersonal skills that concern me. So far, nothing to report there, Marcus says, scrolling through his notes. He keeps to himself during breaks, brings his own lunch, stays late to review documentation. He pauses. Almost, like he's trying to keep a low profile. Or trying too hard to impress, I suggest. Marcus shrugs. Either way, he's not causing problems. Yet. After Marcus leaves, I find myself pulling up the security feeds from the AI division, locating Nathan at his workstation. He's focused intensely. On his screen, fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard as he debugs a complex algorithm. Even from this distance, I can see the familiar crease between his eyebrows, the one that appears when he's fully absorbed in problem-solving. I close the feed, uncomfortable with my own scrutiny. This isn't professional oversight. It's personal curiosity, and I know better than to blur those lines. The weekend passes in a blur of reports and virtual meetings with international clients. Sunday evening finds me in my penthouse apartment, reviewing the upcoming week's schedule when my phone rings with an unfamiliar number. Olivia Chen, I answer, setting aside my tablet. Olivia, it's Nathan Taylor. His voice sounds hesitant, unsure of his reception. I apologize for calling on a Sunday, but I wanted to discuss something before tomorrow's security briefing. I check the time, 8:42 p.m. How did you get this number? It's listed in the emergency contact protocol Marcus had me sign, he explains, quickly. I wouldn't have used it if it wasn't important. I consider hanging up, establishing a clear boundary about personal contact, but professional curiosity wins out. What's so urgent that it can't wait until business hours? I've been reviewing the quantum encryption protocols for Project Sentinel, he says, all business now. There's a vulnerability in the authentication sequence that I don't think anyone's noticed yet. It's subtle, but it could potentially allow a sophisticated attacker to forward your findings to Marcus and the security team, I interrupt, uncomfortable with discussing sensitive information over an unsecured line. I already did, Nathan replies, but the fix requires executive approval for implementation, and tomorrow's briefing might be too late. The monthly system scan starts at 2 a.m. I sigh, recognizing the legitimate urgency. Upload the details to the secure server and send me the access code. I'll review it tonight. Already done, he says, and I can hear the relief in his voice. Access code Sigma Tango 943 Epsilon. I make a mental note. Is there anything else? A pause. Just, thank you for taking my call. I know it's inappropriate to use this number, but I couldn't risk waiting. Your concern for company security is noted, I reply formally. Good night, Nathan. I end the call before he can respond, already pulling up the secure server on my tablet. The file is comprehensive. 30 pages of detailed analysis, potential exploitation scenarios, and proposed security patches. It's brilliant work, identifying a vulnerability that our top security experts missed during multiple reviews. More disconcerting is the timestamp on the document, 3:14 p.m. yesterday. Nathan spent his Saturday at the office digging through security protocols that weren't even part of his assigned duties. I send a text to Marcus. Review Taylor's weekend access logs. Check what else he accessed while on-site Saturday. His response comes quickly. Already flagged. Nothing suspicious. Stayed in his lane. Just went deeper than expected. Vulnerability is legitimate. We're testing his patch now. I set my phone aside, troubled. Nathan's initiative should be commendable. He potentially saved us from a serious security breach. Yet I can't help questioning his motives. Is this genuine dedication or calculated impression management? The Nathan I knew was always strategic, playing the long game. By morning, the security team has confirmed the vulnerability and implemented Nathan's fix. Marcus sends me a brief update. Patch successful. Crisis averted. Taylor's solution was elegant. Minimal code changes with maximum effect. When I arrive at the office, there's a subtle shift in the atmosphere of the AI division. Nathan is at the center of a small group of engineers, explaining something with focused enthusiasm. They're listening with clear respect, a respect he's earned in just 1 week through demonstrated expertise rather than positional authority. I observe for a moment, unnoticed, before continuing to my office. The scene stirs conflicting emotions. Professional appreciation for a valuable team member juxtaposed against personal wariness of the man who once dismissed my abilities. The morning executive briefing includes an overview of the averted security risk. Marcus presents the situation without specifically crediting Nathan, a discretion I appreciate. The vulnerability was identified by a member of the AI security team, he explains to the gathered executives. Their quick action prevented potential data exposure during today's scheduled system scan. Sophie Patel, our chief technology officer, looks impressed. That's sharp work. Which team member? Nathan Taylor, Marcus answers neutrally. New hire, just completed his first week. I catch the raised eyebrows of several executives who've been with the company long enough to know bits of my history. Sophie, who joined just last year, simply nods. Well, that's the kind of initiative we want to encourage, she says. Perhaps we should consider him for the advanced threat team. Let's give him time to settle into his current role, I suggest smoothly. It's only been a week. The meeting moves on to other matters, but I notice Michael Zhao, our chief strategy officer and one of my earliest allies, watching me with knowing concern. As the executives file out afterward, he lingers. So, he begins when we're alone. Nathan, Taylor? That's a blast from the past. I organize papers that don't need organizing. He's qualified for the position. I'm sure he is, Michael agrees, perching on the edge of my conference table. Just like I'm sure there are 100 other qualified candidates who didn't break your heart and steal your initial startup concept. Ancient history, I dismiss, though we both know it's not entirely true. Ascendant surpassed anything Nathan and I envisioned back then. Precisely my point, Michael says. Which begs the question, why is he here now? And why did you let him in the door? I finally meet his concerned gaze. Sometimes it's better to keep potential problems where you can see them, and sometimes it's better to leave vipers outside the garden entirely, he counters gently. Just be careful, Liv. You've built something extraordinary here. Don't let old ghosts haunt the foundation. After he leaves, I sit with his warning, acknowledging its wisdom. My phone buzzes with a message from Emma. N. Taylor requesting 5 minutes of your time re-security protocol. Schedule? I hesitate before responding. Send him up at 2 p.m., maximum 5 minutes. At precisely 2 VAW, Nathan appears at my door, more confident. In his bearing than during our initial meeting, but still respectful. He's wearing the Ascendant security badge on a lanyard, standard for all employees, and carrying a thin folder. Thank you for seeing me. He begins after Emma shows him in. I'll be brief. 3 minutes remaining, I reply, pointing to the elegant wall clock. He almost smiles at the pointed reminder before turning serious. The vulnerability I found was concerning not just for its existence, but for how long it went undetected. It suggests our review protocols may have blind spots. A fair assessment, I acknowledge. What's your recommendation? An adversarial approach to security testing, he says, sliding the folder across my desk. Rotating teams of ethical hackers attempting to breach different system components with incentives for successful exploits discovered. I scan the proposal, recognizing elements from security models we'd discussed years ago when we were still partners. You want to gamify our security testing? Essentially, yes. Competition breeds innovation, especially in security circles. He pauses. It's based on that conversation we had at the lake house, the one about hacker psychology and optimal defenses. The reference to our shared past is unwelcome. The lake house was a long time ago, Nathan. I know, he says quietly. I just meant that the core concept was sound, even back then. You were right about incentivizing the identification of weaknesses. I close the folder, unsettled by his attempt to establish continuity between our past and present. I'll have Marcus review this. If he sees merit in it, we'll discuss implementation with the security team. Thank you, he says, rising. Then, with evident hesitation, For what it's worth, seeing what you've built here. It's extraordinary, Olivia. You've surpassed anything I could have imagined. 4 minutes and 30 seconds, I respond coolly. Anything else? He shakes his head, accepting the dismissal. No, that's all. After he leaves, I find myself staring at the folder, annoyed by my reluctance to simply hand it to Marcus with a directive to evaluate it objectively. Nathan's reference to the lake house has unsettled me more than I'd like to admit. That weekend in the San Juan Islands had been pivotal, the last moments of genuine connection before our relationship began its spiral into competition and resentment. We'd stayed up until dawn, sketching security architectures on the back of takeout menus, energized by shared vision and mutual respect. 2 weeks later, he was questioning my technical judgment in front of potential investors. A month after that, he was gone, taking our joint intellectual property and my professional confidence with him. I press the intercom. Emma, get me Marcus. Within minutes, Marcus arrives, raising an eyebrow at the folder I hand him. Taylor's security proposal. Review it objectively. The concept has merit, regardless of its source. Marcus nods, tucking the folder under his fee arm. Will do. Anything else? I hesitate. How is he integrating with the team? Better than expected, Marcus admits. He's knowledgeable without being condescending, shares credit generously, stays late to help junior team members. He pauses. Not at all what I expected from your description of him. People can change, I allow, though skepticism colors my tone. Or they can get better at hiding their true nature, Marcus counters. I'll keep watching. The following days establish a pattern. Nathan excels at his technical duties, gradually earning the respect of his colleagues through demonstrated expertise, rather than self-promotion. His security proposal, refined by Marcus's team, is implemented as a pilot program with promising early results. Each small success adds a layer of complexity to my ambivalence. Professionally, Nathan is proving to be an asset. Personally, his presence is a persistent reminder of past wounds. 3 weeks into his probation, the situation shifts dramatically. A major potential client, the Department of Defense, requests an on-site demonstration of our quantum encryption technology. The presentation team consists of Sophie, Marcus, and senior engineers from the AI Security Division. We have a problem, Emma announces, entering my office without her usual measured calm. Sophie's flight from Boston is canceled due to weather. She won't make it back for the DoD presentation tomorrow. I check the time, 4:37 p.m. The demonstration is scheduled for 10 a.m. tomorrow. Who's her backup for technical presentations? Wei. Chen? But he's in Singapore until Thursday. Emma consults her tablet. The next most qualified would be Nathan Taylor. He's been working directly on the quantum encryption module they want to see. The irony is not lost on me. Of course it would be Nathan. Get me Marcus, I say, already calculating contingencies. When Marcus arrives, he confirms what I already suspect. Taylor is our best option, given the time frame. He knows the technology inside out, and he's got presentation experience from his previous roles. Can you handle the technical walkthrough? I ask, though I know the answer. Not at the level they'll expect, Marcus admits. I understand the security architecture, but not the quantum mechanics behind it. Taylor speaks that language fluently. I stare out at the Seattle skyline, weighing options that all seem equally problematic. Fine. Brief him on the presentation. Requirements, and make it clear this is a temporary assignment based on immediate need, not a promotion or vote of confidence. Understood. Marcus hesitates. Will you attend the presentation? Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't. As CEO, I typically join only for the final negotiations with major clients, leaving technical demonstrations to my team. But these aren't normal circumstances. Yes, I decide. I'll be there. After Marcus leaves, I pull up Nathan's personnel file, reviewing his presentation history at previous companies. Despite his career downturns, he's consistently received high marks for technical communication, translating complex concepts into accessible language without sacrificing accuracy. My phone buzzes with a message from Nathan. Marcus briefed me on tomorrow's presentation. I'll have slides ready for your approval by 7 p.m. tonight. The directness of the communication, professional, focused on deliverables, respecting the chain of command, is almost disappointing. Part of me expected resistance or resentment at the last-minute assignment, some crack in his carefully constructed humility. At 6:52 p.m., Emma delivers a tablet with Nathan's presentation for my review. The slides are impeccable, technically precise yet clear, with elegant visualizations of complex encryption models. He's included speaking notes that strike the perfect balance between technical depth and strategic relevance for defense applications. Make a few small edits, more out of felt necessity than actual improvement, and return the approved deck to Emma. Tell Taylor we'll do a final run-through at 8:30 tomorrow morning. He asked if you'd like to review it tonight, Emma replies. He's still in the office working on the demonstration model. I glance at the time, nearly 8 p.m. Fine, tell him I'll come down. The AI security division is largely empty when I arrive, save for a few dedicated engineers working late. Nathan is in the demonstration lab, surrounded by holographic displays showing quantum encryption sequences in real time. He's making minute adjustments to the visualization, so absorbed that he doesn't notice my arrival until I clear my throat. Olivia, he says, startled. I mean, Ms. Chen. He quickly shuts down a secondary display that I can't quite see. Show me what you've prepared, I say, choosing to ignore the slip into familiarity. For the next 30 minutes, Nathan walks me through the technical demonstration, explaining how he's simplified the visualization of quantum key distribution without compromising accuracy. It's brilliant work, especially for something prepared on such short notice. The DoD representatives will include both technical specialists and strategic decision-makers. I remind him. The presentation needs to satisfy both audiences. I've structured it in layers, he explains, pulling up a flowchart. Core concepts accessible to everyone, with technical depth available through drill-down demonstrations if their specialists want to explore specific elements. I nod, finding no flaws to critique. What were you working on when I came in? The display you closed. A flicker of discomfort crosses his face. An alternative visualization approach. It wasn't working as well as this one. Something in his tone suggests he's not being entirely forthcoming, but I let it pass. Be ready at 8:30 for the final run-through. As you... I turn to leave. He calls after me. Olivia, Ms. Chen. When I pause, he continues. Thank you for trusting me with this. I understand what's at stake for Ascendant. Just do your job, Nathan, I reply evenly. That's all I'm asking. Later that night, curiosity gets the better of me. I access the lab's security footage remotely, rewinding to see what Nathan was working on when I arrived. The secondary display shows something unexpected. Old diagrams from our lake house weekend, scanned and digitized, incorporated into an alternative presentation approach. The sight of our joint work from years ago, preserved and repurposed, stirs uncomfortable emotions. Did he keep those sketches all this time? And why incorporate them now? The morning of the DoD presentation dawns clear and bright, Seattle's notoriously fickle weather offering perfect conditions for our visitors' arrival. The final run-through goes smoothly, Nathan demonstrating complete command of both the technology and the presentation narrative. At 9:58 a.m., the Department of Defense delegation arrives. 3 uniformed military officials and 2 civilians in dark suits. The introductions are formal. The atmosphere charged with the weight of potential contracts worth hundreds of millions. General Morris, Colonel Chen, Major Rodriguez. I greet them. Welcome to Ascendant Technologies. I'm Olivia Chen, CEO. This is Marcus Diaz, our head of security, and Nathan Taylor, project manager for our quantum encryption initiative. Nathan steps forward, offering a respectful nod to the officials. It's an honor to demonstrate our technology for you today. Shall we begin? What follows is nothing short of masterful. Nathan guides the delegation through increasingly complex layers of quantum encryption technology, reading their reactions with precision and adjusting his technical depth accordingly. When Colonel Tiu Chen asks a particularly challenging question about vulnerability to quantum computing attacks, Nathan provides an answer so comprehensive yet accessible that even I learn something new. I watch the delegation's expressions shift from polite interest to genuine engagement, particularly General Morris, whose approval is crucial for our contract hopes. By the time Nathan concludes the technical portion, the general is leaning forward, his usual stoic demeanor replaced by evident interest. "Impressive tech, Ms. Chen," General Morris remarks, turning to me. "Your team clearly understands the unique challenges we face." "Thank you, General." Ascendant was built on the principle that security isn't just about algorithms. It's about anticipating human ingenuity, both defensive and offensive. Colonel Chen, the delegation's technical specialist, gestures toward the quantum visualization, still hovering in the demonstration space. "Mr. Taylor, this visual representation of quantum entanglement as it relates to encryption, it's remarkably intuitive. I haven't seen anything like it." Nathan acknowledges the compliment with a respectful nod. "Thank you, Colonel. The visualization framework was actually conceptualized by Ms. Chen years ago. I've merely built upon her original insight." The attribution catches me off guard. He's referring to those lake house sketches, our joint work, but giving me full credit. It's an unexpected moment of professional generosity that doesn't align with the Nathan I remember. "Well, Ms. Chen," Major Rodriguez says, "your approach to quantum-resistant encryption could be exactly what we need for the Nexus initiative." "Nexus?" I inquire, recognizing an opportunity to extend the conversation. "Classified, of course," the Major replies with a smile. "But let's just say it involves securing communications across multiple domains simultaneously." The meeting extends well beyond its scheduled hour, culminating in an invitation to submit a detailed proposal for the Nexus project, a significant step forward in the procurement process. As the delegation departs, Marcus escorts them to the lobby while Nathan begins shutting down the demonstration systems. "That went well," I observe, maintaining a neutral tone despite my genuine satisfaction with the outcome. "Better than expected," Nathan agrees, careful not to appear too self-congratulatory. Colonel Chen's questions suggested they're further along in quantum computing development than public reports indicate. I nod, having noted the same. "You handled the technical deep dive effectively." "Thank you." He hesitates, then adds, "I meant what I said about the visualization framework. The core concept was yours. That night at the lake house when you sketched quantum entanglement on the back of the pizza box. The memory surfaces despite my efforts to suppress it. Nathan's amazement as I explained how quantum particles could be visualized through metaphorical mapping, his genuine respect for my theoretical approach. It was one of the last times he treated me as an intellectual equal. "Ancient history?" I replied dismissively. "The current implementation is entirely Ascendant's work." "Of course," he says quickly, perhaps sensing my discomfort with the shared memory. Still, credit where credit is due. Before I can respond, Marcus returns, his expression serious. "They're impressed. The general said this was the first presentation that didn't make him want to check his watch." High praise from Morris, I observe. He's notorious for cutting meetings short. "Speaking of which," Marcus continues, "their technical team wants a follow-up session next week, more in-depth exploration of the encryption module." Nathan looks to me, clearly wondering if he'll be involved in the follow-up. I deliberate briefly, before making a decision based on pragmatic business considerations rather than personal history. "Nathan, Coordinate with Marcus on the technical preparation. I want daily progress reports, and I'll need to approve any demonstrations or technical documentation before they're presented. Understood, he replies, his professional demeanor masking whatever emotions might lie beneath. As I walk back to my office, Emma falls into step beside me, tablet in hand. The board is already getting calls about the DoD meeting, she informs me. Apparently, word travels fast in defense circles. Schedule a briefing for tomorrow morning, I instruct her, and move my dinner with the venture capital group to next week. I want to focus on the Nexus proposal. Already done, she confirms. Also, HR sent up Nathan Taylor's 30-day performance review for your approval. Marcus gave him top ratings across all categories. I take the tablet, scanning the glowing evaluation. According to Marcus's assessment, Nathan has exceeded expectations in technical expertise, teamwork, initiative, and adaptability. There's not a single negative note, unusual for Marcus, who typically finds something to critique even in top performers. Have Marcus come see me before end of day, I tell Emma, handing back the tablet, and send in Michael when he's available. Later that afternoon, Michael lounges in one of my office chairs, examining the DoD meeting notes with evident approval. Sounds like Taylor knocked it out of the park, he comments. The board will be pleased. They've been after that defense contract for months. He performed adequately, I acknowledge, unwilling to be too effusive. Michael raises an eyebrow. That's generous of you, considering your history. I'm capable of objective professional assessment, regardless of personal considerations. Of course you are, he agrees easily. That's how you've built Ascendant into what it is. But that doesn't mean the personal element isn't a factor. I lean back in my chair, studying my old friend. What are you suggesting, Michael? Nothing specific, he says with a casual shrug that doesn't match his watchful eyes. Just observing that you've always kept a fortress around your personal feelings, especially after what happened with Nathan. It served you well professionally, but what? I prompt when he trails off. But fortresses keep things in as well as out, he finishes. Just be sure you know which is which. Before I can respond to this cryptic advice, my intercom buzzes with Emma's voice. Marcus is here to see you. Michael stands, giving me a knowing look. Think about it, Liv. That's all I'm saying. Once Michael leaves, Marcus enters, his expression already defensive as if anticipating criticism. You wanted to see me? I gesture to the chair Michael just vacated. I received your evaluation of Nathan Taylor. And you disagree, he surmises, taking a seat. I'm surprised, I correct him. You're not usually so effusive. Marcus shrugs, his broad shoulders rising and falling beneath his tailored jacket. I call it like I see it. Taylor's good, better than good. His technical skills are outstanding. His work ethic is solid, and contrary to what I expected, he's not trying to climb over anyone to move up the ladder. It's been 30 days, I remind him. Hardly enough time to reveal someone's true character. Maybe, Marcus allows. Or maybe losing everything was the wake-up call he needed. Either way, I'm evaluating his current performance, not speculating about future behavior. His subtle reprimand is not lost on me. And the security proposal implementation? How's that progressing? Extremely well, Marcus admits. The gamified security testing has already identified 17 previously unknown vulnerabilities. The team's engaged with it in a way I haven't seen before. I nod, processing this information against my lingering reservations. And you're comfortable with him taking a more visible role in the DoD follow-up? Marcus studies me for a moment. Professionally? Absolutely. He knows the technology better than anyone except maybe Sophie, and he communicates it clearly. He pauses. Personally, that's not my call to make. But I will say this. If we lose this contract because we sidelined our best technical presenter due to your history with him, that's not a decision I want any part of. His bluntness is why I hired him. Marcus has never been afraid to tell me. Uncomfortable truths. Still, the assessment stings. Noted, I reply coolly. Prepare him for the follow-up session, but I want you present for every interaction with the DoD team. Always plan to be, Marcus assures me, rising. At the door, he hesitates. For what it's worth, I still don't trust him completely. But I'm starting to think he might actually be here for the work, not some elaborate revenge scheme. After he leaves, I find myself once again reviewing Nathan's performance data, searching for inconsistencies or red flags that might justify my continued wariness. There are none. Just a steady stream of technical contributions, positive peer feedback, and growing integration with the team. The rational CEO part of my brain recognizes his value to Ascendant. The wounded personal part remains skeptical of his transformation. The question is which part should guide my decisions about his future with the company. My reflection is interrupted by a text from Sophie, finally back from Boston. Heard Taylor crushed the DoD presentation. We should consider accelerating his probationary review. Before I can respond, another message arrives, this one from Nathan himself. Request permission to access Project Sentinel archives for DoD preparation. Need historical quantum resistance. Testing data. Marcus approved with your final authorization. The request is reasonable given his assignment, yet I hesitate. Project Sentinel was Ascendant's breakthrough product, the quantum-resistant encryption system that put us on the map and formed the foundation of our current technology stack. Its archives contain not just technical specifications, but the evolution of my own thinking about encryption, including some concepts that date back to my time with Nathan. I type my response carefully. Access granted for specific testing data only. Marcus to monitor access. All extracted information to be reviewed before DoD presentation. His reply comes quickly. Understood. Thank you. That evening, rather than heading home, I find myself returning to the AI security division after most employees have left. The labs are quiet, illuminated only by the glow of monitoring stations and the soft blue security lighting. Nathan is still there, surrounded by holographic displays showing historical encryption test data. He's so focused that he doesn't notice my approach until I'm standing at the edge of the light cast by his workstation. Ms. Chen, he says, startled by my sudden appearance. I didn't expect anyone else to be here this late. It's my company, I remind him. I keep whatever hours necessary. He nods, accepting the gentle rebuke. Of course. I was just reviewing the Sentinel test data from 2019, specifically the quantum-resistant simulations against theoretical future computing capabilities. I move closer, examining the displays. The data is familiar. I personally oversaw many of these tests during Sentinel's development. You're focusing on the wrong attack vectors, I observe. The DoD will be more concerned with state-level threats than theoretical quantum breakthroughs. That's what I thought initially, Nathan agrees. But look at Colonel Chen's specific questions during the presentation. He pulls up a transcript of the meeting, highlighting several technical inquiries. These suggest they're actually more worried about quantum computing development in adversarial nations than traditional cryptographic attacks. I study the highlighted questions, seeing his point. Perceptive analysis. I learned from the best, he says quietly. The comment hangs between us, its sincerity unclear. Is it simple flattery, an attempt to ingratiate himself, or genuine acknowledgement of our shared history? Rather than addressing it directly, I gesture toward the earliest Sentinel testing data. That simulation architecture, it's inefficient by current standards. We've developed more sophisticated modeling since then. I notice that, Nathan says, pulling up comparison charts. The newer models are more computationally efficient, but I think there's something valuable in the original approach. Its brute force methodology caught edge cases that the more elegant solutions sometimes miss. It's an astute observation, one I've made myself but never documented officially. The fact that he identified this subtle advantage in the original architecture is both impressive and unsettling. It suggests a level of intuitive understanding that matches my own. "Show me what you're thinking," I say, professional curiosity temporarily overriding personal caution. For the next hour, Nathan walks me through his analysis of Sentinel's evolution, highlighting how certain original design elements could be reincorporated into the current architecture to enhance quantum resistance. His thinking is clear, his observations insightful. Despite myself, I find the conversation intellectually stimulating in a way few technical discussions have been recently. "This approach," I comment, pointing to a hybrid methodology he's proposed, "it's reminiscent of what we discussed at the lake house, combining probabilistic distribution with deterministic checkpoints." He nods, a cautious light in his eyes at my reference to our shared past. "It is. That was a good idea then, and it's still valid now. Some concepts stand the test of time. The subtext is unmistakable, but I choose not to acknowledge it. Incorporate this hybrid approach into the DoD presentation materials. They'll want to see that we're not just relying on current best practices, but actively evolving our thinking." "I will," he agrees. Then, with evident hesitation, "Olivia, Ms. Chen, may I ask something directly?" I should refuse, maintain professional distance, but curiosity wins out. "Go ahead. Why did you hire me?" The question is simple but loaded with unspoken complexity. "You could have had me escorted out the moment you recognized me. Instead, you offered me a position, lower than what I applied for, but still a chance. Why?" It's a question I've asked myself repeatedly over the past month. The answer I give him is only partly true. Ascendant values talent. Your technical skills are valuable to the company, regardless of our personal history. That's the CEO answer, he observes quietly. What about Olivia's answer? Olivia doesn't enter into professional decisions, I reply coldly. He holds my gaze for a moment, then nods, accepting the boundary I've drawn. Fair enough. Thank you for the technical guidance tonight. I'll have the revised presentation ready for review by tomorrow afternoon. I leave without further comment, disturbed by the interaction in ways I can't fully articulate. There was a time when Nathan and I communicated through unspoken understanding, anticipating each other's thoughts and building on shared insights. Tonight's conversation contained echoes of that connection, a professional resonance I hadn't expected to experience again. The following week brings increased activity around the DoD proposal. Sophie, now back from Boston, takes lead on the technical development while Nathan continues refining the encryption demonstrations for the follow-up meeting. During the daily security briefing, Marcus reports something unexpected. Taylor turned down a direct invitation from Colonel Chen to discuss the encryption module privately. What? This strikes me as completely out of character for the Nathan I knew, who never missed an opportunity for individual recognition. Apparently, the colonel reached out to him directly, impressed by his technical knowledge, Marcus explains. Taylor thanked him but redirected the conversation to include Sophie and the rest of the technical team. Said it should be a collaborative discussion. That's surprising, I admit. That's what I thought. Marcus agrees. It would have been a perfect opportunity to make himself indispensable to the DoD team, potentially leverage that relationship for his own advantage. Yet he didn't, I muse, trying to reconcile this behavior with my understanding of Nathan's character. People can change, Marcus suggests, not for the first time. Or they're playing a longer game than we recognize. I counter. The follow-up meeting with the DoD team exceeds expectations. Nathan, Sophie, and Marcus present a comprehensive technical overview that addresses all of the colonel's concerns while highlighting Ascendant's unique approaches to quantum-resistant encryption. General Morris concludes the session with words that send a ripple of excitement through our team. We'll need to continue discussions with our appropriations committee, but I think it's fair to say that Ascendant is our preferred partner for Nexus implementation. After the DoD team departs, an impromptu celebration breaks out in the conference room. Sophie is particularly effusive in her praise of Nathan's contributions. That explanation of lattice-based cryptography was brilliant, she tells him as champagne is distributed. You made something incredibly complex sound almost simple. Nathan accepts the compliment graciously, but I notice he's quick to highlight Sophie's role in developing the underlying algorithms. There's none of the credit hoarding I remember from our past working relationship. As CEO, I offer measured congratulations to the team, acknowledging that we still have contractual hurdles to clear before celebrating too enthusiastically. Nathan approaches as I'm preparing to leave. Ms. Chen, do you have a moment? I check my watch. A brief one. He leads me slightly away from the celebrating group. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to be part of this presentation team. I know it wasn't an easy decision given our history. As I said before, Ascendant values talent. You performed your role effectively. He nods, accepting my professional assessment. There's something else. He hesitates, then continues. In the spirit of complete transparency, I should inform you that General Morris approached me about joining the Nexus Advisory Board if the contract moves forward. It would involve occasional consultation outside my duties here. I study him, surprised, both by the offer and by his disclosure of it. That's a prestigious opportunity. It is, he agrees, maintaining steady eye contact. But I want to be clear that my loyalty is to Ascendant. If you feel there's any conflict of interest, I'll decline immediately. The old Nathan would have leveraged such an opportunity for personal advancement without hesitation, possibly using it as negotiating leverage. This transparent disclosure is unexpected. I'll need to review the terms of the advisory role before making a determination, I tell him, keeping my tone neutral. Have them send the formal invitation to my office. Of course. He pauses, then adds, just so you know, I've already told General Morris that any advisory role would be subject to your approval and Ascendant security protocols. I nod, acknowledging the professional courtesy. I appreciate the transparency. As I turn to leave, Nathan speaks again, his voice quieter. Olivia. He catches himself. Ms. Chen, I know trust is earned, not given. I'm trying to earn it back, one day at a time. The simple declaration hangs in the air between us. I don't acknowledge it verbally, merely giving him a measured nod before walking away, but his words follow me back to my office. Later that evening, I find an email from General Morris in my inbox, praising Nathan's technical expertise while also commending Ascendant's overall approach to the Nexus requirements. Attached is the formal invitation for Nathan to join the advisory board, a part-time commitment that would enhance our company's standing with the defense community while providing Nathan with high-level security clearance and significant professional prestige. Michael joins me for a late dinner at my penthouse apartment, where we discuss the implications over wine and takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant. It's actually a good thing for Ascendant, Michael points out, refilling our glasses. Having an employee on the advisory board gives us insight into DoD priorities beyond just this contract. It also elevates Nathan's profile considerably. I counter. A seat on the Nexus advisory board makes him more valuable to competitors if he decides to leave. Michael studies me over the rim of his wine glass. Is that what you're worried about? That he'll take this opportunity and leverage it elsewhere? Or are you concerned that he's gradually working his way back to a position of power that might somehow threaten you? I set my glass down, irritated by his perceptiveness. I'm concerned about protecting Ascendant's interests. Nathan has a history of putting his personal advancement above company loyalty. The Nathan you knew 5 years ago, yes, Michael agrees. But what about the Nathan who's been working here for the past 6 weeks? The one who, according to Marcus, redirected a private meeting invitation to include the whole team? The one who's been putting in 16-hour days to make this DoD proposal perfect. 6 weeks is hardly enough time to judge someone's character, I argue. True, Michael concedes. But at some point, you have to decide if you're evaluating his current behavior or punishing him for past actions. He leans forward, his expression serious. Liv, you're the most rational, clear-eyed person I know in business contexts, but with Nathan, there's something else at play. That's not true, I protest, though without much conviction. Isn't it? Michael raises an eyebrow. You keep him at arm's length professionally, even as reports of his work become increasingly positive. You scrutinize his contributions more closely than anyone else's. And now, faced with an opportunity that objectively benefits Ascendant, you're hesitating because it also benefits him. Put so bluntly, my reservations sound petty, even to my own ears. You think I should approve the advisory role. I think you should make the decision that's best for Ascendant, Michael says carefully. And I think you should be honest with yourself about whether personal history is clouding that judgment. After Michael leaves, I stand at my living room. Windows, looking out at the Seattle skyline glittering against the night sky. The city has changed dramatically in the 5 years since Nathan and I parted ways. New towers rising, old landmarks transformed, the constant evolution that defines urban landscapes. People can change too, I remind myself. The question is whether Nathan's transformation is genuine or merely a calculated adaptation to his reduced circumstances. The following morning, I make my decision, sending a brief email to Nathan. Advisory board role approved with conditions. See Emma for security clearance paperwork and conflict of interest agreements. His response comes within minutes. Thank you for your trust. We'll complete all required documentation immediately. The weeks that follow bring a flurry of activity as the DoD contract moves from proposal to negotiation stages. Nathan divides his time between his regular duties, nexus preparation, and occasional advisory board meetings, maintaining meticulous documentation of all DoD interactions as required by our security protocols. His first advisory board meeting coincides with a quarterly review of the AI Security Division. Sophie presents the department's accomplishments, with Nathan offering occasional technical clarifications about the encryption modules. And finally, Sophie concludes, I'd like to highlight the significant contributions of the quantum authentication team, led informally by Nathan these past 2 weeks while Jun Lee was on paternity leave. This is the first I've heard of Nathan leading any team, informal or otherwise. I make a mental note to speak with Marcus about this development. After the meeting, I catch Sophie in the hallway. Nathan was leading the quantum authentication team? Not officially, she clarifies quickly, perhaps sensing my concern. Jun needed someone to coordinate the team's work while he was out, and Nathan was the natural choice given his expertise. It was a temporary arrangement, fully documented in the division's weekly reports. I don't recall seeing that in the reports I received, I observe. Sophie looks uncomfortable. That's my oversight. The arrangement was supposed to be for 2 days initially, but when June's baby came early, we extended it. I should have flagged that change for your attention. I nod, accepting her explanation while still feeling uneasy about the situation. In the future, any leadership responsibilities assigned to probationary employees should be explicitly approved, regardless of duration. Of course, Sophie agrees. Though, if I may, Nathan's probationary period ends next week. His 90-day review is scheduled for Friday. The reminder sends an unexpected jolt through me. Has it really been nearly 3 months since Nathan joined Ascendant? The time has passed more quickly than I realized, filled with the DoD contract negotiations and regular business demands. I'll review his file before the evaluation meeting, I assure Sophie, already mentally rescheduling my week to allow time for a thorough assessment. That evening, I request comprehensive reports from every department Nathan has interacted with, determined to base my evaluation on complete information rather than personal bias. The results are uniformly positive. Marcus praises his security contributions, Sophie highlights his technical innovations, and even finance notes his careful adherence to budgetary guidelines for the DoD preparation. The report from Human Resources includes peer evaluations that describe Nathan as collaborative, generous with expertise, and respectful of diverse perspectives, qualities I never associated with him during our previous working relationship. Most surprising is the feedback from junior team members who specifically mention Nathan's mentorship and willingness to explain complex concepts without condescension. The Nathan I knew had little patience for those he deemed less technically proficient. This level of collegial support represents a significant departure from his previous behavior patterns. I'm still reviewing these reports when Emma announces an unexpected visitor, Michael, carrying what appears to be a vintage bottle of whiskey. Thought, "You might need this," he says, placing the bottle on my desk. "Marcus mentioned you've been holed up here for hours reviewing Nathan's performance data." "Just being thorough," I defend, gesturing to the stacks of reports. "His probationary review is next week." Michael sits without invitation, examining the organized chaos of my desk. "And? What's the verdict?" The feedback is consistently positive, I admit reluctantly. There's not a single substantive criticism in any of the departmental reports. "Shocking," Michael says with gentle sarcasm. "The guy who's been working 18-hour days and solving problems everyone else missed is getting good reviews." I give him a sharp look. "This isn't a joke, Michael. This decision impacts Ascendant's future." "I know," he says, his expression softening. "But at some point, Liv, you have to acknowledge the possibility that Nathan has genuinely changed. That losing everything, including you, was the wake-up call he needed." His words hit uncomfortably close to thoughts I've been avoiding. Even if that's true, it doesn't erase what happened before. "No, it doesn't," Michael agrees. "But holding on to that anger doesn't hurt him anymore. It just limits you." "This isn't about anger," I insist, though the heat in my voice suggests otherwise. "Isn't it?" Michael challenges gently. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're searching for reasons to justify feelings that might not fit the current reality." I lean back in my chair, suddenly tired. "When did you become my therapist?" "Around the same time you started needing one," he quips, opening the whiskey and pouring 2 small measures into coffee cups. "Look, I'm not saying you should suddenly trust him implicitly or promote him to the executive team. I'm just suggesting that maybe, just maybe, it's time to evaluate Nathan Taylor as he is now, not as he was then." The whiskey burns pleasantly as I consider Michael's perspective. "I'll take it under advisement," I concede, neither accepting nor rejecting his counsel. Michael raises his makeshift whiskey glass in a mock toast. "That's all I ask. Well, that and your presence at my anniversary party next Saturday. Jenna's been asking if you're coming." The casual reminder of life beyond Ascendant, of friends, relationships, celebrations, momentarily displaces my professional concerns. "I'll be there. I already bought your gift." "Let me guess. Something practical and elegantly understated just like you." I smile despite myself. "You'll find out next Saturday." After Michael leaves, I continue reviewing the performance data, now with his words echoing in my thoughts. Am I being unfair to Nathan, letting past wounds distort my perception of his current contributions? Or am I simply being appropriately cautious given our history? The next morning brings an unexpected complication. Emma enters my office with an unusual expression, somewhere between concern and curiosity. "There's a situation in the lobby," she informs me. "A woman is asking to see Nathan Taylor. She's quite insistent." "Security issue?" I ask, immediately alert. "Not exactly. She claims to be his ex-wife, Diane. Says she needs to speak with him urgently about a personal matter. I wasn't aware. Nathan had been married after our relationship ended, though it's not particularly surprising. 5 years is a long time, and Nathan was never one to remain single for extended periods. Have security escort her to a conference room and inform Nathan of her presence, I instruct Emma. This isn't a company matter. Emma nods, but hesitates, before leaving. She seems quite upset. Mentioned something about missing payments and financial obligations. The information shouldn't interest me. Nathan's personal life is his own business. Yet I find myself curious about the circumstances that brought his ex-wife to Ascendant's doorstep. Keep me informed if the situation escalates to a security concern, I tell Emma, forcing my tone to remain neutral. Otherwise, it's between Nathan and his visitor? An hour later, Marcus stops by with his regular security update, concluding with an unexpected addendum. About the Taylor situation, thought you should know his ex-wife left about 20 minutes ago. No security issues, but there was some noticeable tension. That's Nathan's personal business, I remind him, though I'm admittedly curious. Marcus nods, but then adds, generally, yes. But when she started claiming that he's hiding assets that should have been part of their divorce settlement, and specifically mentioned potential new income from government consulting work, it verged into company territory. This gets my attention. She's aware of the Nexus advisory role? Seems to be, Marcus confirms. Nathan handled it discreetly, took her to the small conference room on the lobby level. I monitored remotely, but didn't intervene. He explained that the advisory position was recent and would be properly documented in his financial disclosures. To the court. Was that the end of it? For now, Marcus says with a shrug. She left without further incident, but made some comment about her lawyer being in touch. I consider this development thoughtfully. Nathan's divorce proceedings and financial obligations are his private affairs, but any potential legal complications involving the advisory role could impact Ascendant's relationship with the DoD. Have legal review the conflict of interest agreements Nathan signed for the advisory position, I instruct Marcus. Make sure we're properly insulated from any personal legal issues he might be facing. Already done, Marcus assures me. Standard procedure whenever we have a situation like this. Everything's in order on our end. After Marcus leaves, I find myself unexpectedly distracted by thoughts of Nathan's ex-wife. What was their relationship like? When did they marry, and what led to their divorce? The questions are entirely irrelevant to Ascendant's operations, yet they persist, nagging at my professional focus. By late afternoon, I've managed to redirect my attention to quarterly projections when Emma announces another visitor, Nathan, himself, requesting a few minutes of my time. I briefly consider refusing, citing my busy schedule, but professional courtesy prevails. Send him in. Nathan enters with uncharacteristic hesitation, his usual confident demeanor subdued. Thank you for seeing me, Ms. Chen. I wanted to address what happened this morning. Your personal matters are your own, Mr. Taylor, unless they impact Ascendant. Nods, accepting this boundary. I understand, but given my advisory role with Nexus, I thought it prudent to provide some context. He pauses, clearly organizing his thoughts. My ex-wife and I have been divorced for nearly 18 months. The financial settlement was finalized 6 months ago, but recent circumstances have created some tension. Recent circumstances meaning your position here and the advisory role, I surmise. Yes, he acknowledges. I was in a difficult financial situation after Stellaris downsized. The divorce settlement was based on my income at that time. Now that my prospects have improved, Diane feels the settlement should be revisited. I maintain a neutral expression, though I'm surprised by his forthright explanation. As I said, that's between you and your ex-wife, provided it doesn't create complications for Ascendant or the Nexus project. It won't, he assures me. I've already contacted my attorney to update my financial disclosures and address Diane's concerns through proper legal channels. I simply wanted you to be aware of the situation in case she attempts to contact Ascendant. Again. His transparency is noteworthy. The old Nathan would have hidden personal complications, particularly financial ones, rather than acknowledging them directly. I appreciate the notification, I tell him. If there are any developments that could potentially impact your work or the advisory role, please inform Marcus immediately. Of course, he agrees readily. Then, with evident discomfort, there's one other thing you should know. During our marriage, Diane became acquainted with some details of my previous relationship with you. This revelation sends an unexpected jolt through me. The idea that Nathan discussed our relationship with his wife, that a stranger knows details of that painful chapter in my life, is unsettling. What exactly does that mean? I ask, my tone notably cooler. Nathan grimaces, recognizing my discomfort. Nothing inappropriate or personal, I assure you. She knew we had been business partners and briefly involved romantically. She's aware that our professional relationship ended poorly. And you think she might try to use this information somehow? I don't believe so, he says carefully. Diane isn't vindictive by nature, but in her current state of mind, feeling that she's been treated unfairly financially, I can't predict her actions with complete certainty. I absorb this information, calculating potential risks to both Ascendant and my carefully constructed public image. Very few people know the full details of my history with Nathan. It's not something I've discussed openly, preferring to focus on Ascendant's accomplishments rather than my personal past. If your ex-wife attempts to contact me or anyone else at Ascendant regarding our previous relationship, direct her to our legal department immediately, I instruct him. I won't have personal history becoming fodder for divorce proceedings or gossip. Absolutely, Nathan agrees emphatically. I've made it clear to her that any attempt to involve you or Ascendant in our financial disputes would be completely inappropriate. He pauses. For what it's worth, I've never discussed the details of what happened between us with anyone, including Diane. She knows only that we were partners and that the partnership ended badly. Whether this discretion stems from residual respect or simple self-preservation is unclear, but I find myself marginally reassured. Is there anything else I should be aware of? I ask, ready to conclude this uncomfortable conversation. No, Nathan says, rising from his chair. I just wanted to address the situation directly rather than letting you hear about it secondhand. Thank you for your time. After he leaves, I sit motionless for several minutes, processing this unexpected complication. The reappearance of Nathan in my professional life was challenge enough. The potential intrusion of his ex-wife adds an unwelcome dimension to an already complex situation. Emma interrupts my thoughts with a gentle reminder about my next appointment, and I force myself to refocus on Ascendant's immediate business concerns. Personal complications, however distracting, must remain secondary to the company's operations. The following days pass without further incident. Nathan's 90-day review approaches, and I find myself unusually preoccupied with the evaluation. Under normal circumstances, department heads handle probationary reviews, with executive input reserved for director-level positions and above. Nathan's mid-level role wouldn't typically warrant my direct involvement, yet I can't bring myself to delegate the decision entirely. Marcus and Sophie submit glowing formal assessments, both recommending that Nathan be transitioned from probationary to permanent status with an expanded role in the AI security division. Their evaluations cite specific technical contributions, team leadership during June's absence, and his critical role in securing the DoD's interest. The morning of the review, I arrive at the office earlier than usual, standing at my window as dawn breaks over Seattle. The city is shrouded in its characteristic morning mist, the Space Needle a ghostly silhouette against the lightening sky. In the reflection of the glass, I see not just the CEO of Ascendant Technologies, but also the younger Olivia, the one who once believed in Nathan's promises of partnership and support. My intercom buzzes with Emma's voice. Nathan Taylor is here. For his review meeting. Send him in, I reply, turning from the window to face the door. Nathan enters, dressed in a well-tailored navy suit that suggests his financial situation has improved since joining Ascendant. He carries a slim portfolio containing what I assume are performance metrics and project notes. Always prepared, always meticulous. Some things haven't changed. Good morning, Ms. Chen, he greets me, his tone professionally respectful. Take a seat, I instruct, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. I've reviewed the departmental evaluations of your performance during the probationary period. He nods, his expression neutral, though I detect a subtle tension in his posture. Despite the positive feedback he's undoubtedly received from Sophie and Marcus, he knows that my assessment carries the final weight. Both Sophie and Marcus have recommended transitioning you to permanent status. I begin, keeping my tone measured. Your technical contributions have been significant, particularly regarding the quantum encryption modules for the DoD project. Thank you, he acknowledges. I've appreciated the opportunity to work with such a talented team. I study him for a moment, noting how carefully he's navigating this conversation. Professional without being presumptuous, grateful without appearing obsequious. The Nathan I knew 5 years ago would have been listing his accomplishments, subtly, taking credit for team successes, positioning himself for advancement. There were some concerns about your assuming leadership responsibilities during Junli's absence, I continue, observing his reaction. Specifically, that this occurred without executive approval. A flicker of surprise crosses his face. I apologize if that created any issues. When Jun needed to leave suddenly, Sophie asked me to coordinate the team's daily activities. I didn't view it as a formal leadership role, more as temporary task coordination. Nevertheless, given your probationary status, such arrangements should have been explicitly approved, I point out. You're absolutely right, he agrees without defensiveness. In retrospect, I should have clarified the reporting structure with HR. It won't happen again. His immediate acceptance of the criticism, without excuses or deflection, is another departure from past behavior patterns. The old Nathan would have argued semantics, positioning the oversight as a reasonable interpretation of company policy rather than acknowledging any error in judgment. Your advisory role with the Nexus project has also progressed, I note, changing direction. General Morris speaks highly of your contributions. The advisory work has been fascinating, Nathan responds, a genuine enthusiasm entering his voice. The DoD's approach to quantum security challenges aligns remarkably well with Ascendant's research priorities. I believe there's potential for significant mutual benefit as the relationship develops. And your recent personal complications? I ask directly. Any developments that might impact your professional obligations? He meets my gaze steadily. The situation with my ex-wife is being addressed through appropriate legal channels. She's been made aware that any attempt to involve Ascendant in personal financial matters would be inappropriate and potentially actionable. My attorney doesn't anticipate further workplace incidents. I nod, accepting this assurance for the moment. Your technical qualifications were never in question, Nathan. The concerns that remained after our initial meeting centered around trust, reliability, and interpersonal dynamics. I pause, allowing the weight of my next statement to register. Over the past 90 days, you've made significant progress in addressing those concerns. His expression remains carefully composed, but I detect a hint of relief in his eyes. Thank you. That means a great deal coming from you. Based on departmental recommendations and observed performance, I continue, your probationary status will be converted to permanent employment, effective immediately. Additionally, given your contributions to the quantum encryption modules, you'll be formally assigned as technical lead for that component of the DoD project, reporting directly to Sophie. I appreciate the opportunity, he says, his professional demeanor masking whatever deeper emotions might lie beneath. And the trust it represents. It's a provisional trust, I clarify, unwilling to concede too much ground. earned through demonstrated performance but requiring continued validation. He accepts this qualification with a slight nod. Understood. There's one additional matter, I add, reaching for a folder on my desk. The Nexus Advisory Board is establishing a technical subcommittee focused specifically on quantum-resistant authentication protocols. General Morris has requested your participation as Ascendant's representative. Nathan's eyebrows rise slightly. This is clearly unexpected news. That's a significant opportunity. It is, I agree. It's also a significant responsibility. The subcommittee will have access to classified threat assessments and technology forecasts. Your participation would require additional security clearance and regular briefings with government intelligence agencies. I understand the implications, he says carefully. May I ask if you've already responded to General Morris's request? I've informed him that Ascendant will nominate a representative pending internal review, I explain. Given your technical expertise and existing relationship with the Nexus team, you're the logical candidate. However, before making that nomination official, I need absolute certainty that there are no hidden complications or conflicts, personal or professional, that might compromise your effectiveness in this role. The unspoken question hangs between us. Can I trust you completely with something this important? Nathan considers his response thoughtfully before speaking. 5 years ago, I would have jumped at this opportunity without hesitation, focused primarily on how it might advance my career. He meets my gaze directly. Today, my first question is how it serves Ascendant's interests, and whether I'm genuinely the best person for the role. If you believe I am, then I'm prepared to accept the responsibilities and security protocols it entails. If not, I'll support whoever you choose to nominate instead. His answer surprises me, both in content and delivery. There's a maturity and perspective that wasn't present in the Nathan I knew, a willingness to subordinate personal ambition to organizational needs that contradicts my established understanding of his character. The nomination paperwork requires your signature, I tell him, sliding the folder across my desk. Review it carefully before deciding. General Morris needs our response by Friday. I'll review it today and get it back to you by tomorrow morning, he promises, accepting the folder. One last thing, I add as he prepares to leave. Your expanded role and the advisory subcommittee position come with expectations of absolute transparency. Any developments that might impact your effectiveness or Ascendant's reputation, professional or personal, need to be disclosed immediately. Absolute transparency, he repeats, nodding his understanding. You have my word. After he leaves, Michael calls, somehow aware of the meeting's outcome, despite having no official role in the review process. His uncanny ability to track Ascendant's internal dynamics remains both impressive and slightly irritating. So Taylor's permanent and promoted, he says without preamble. Bold move, considering your lingering trust issues. How do you know that already? I demand, though without real heat. The paperwork hasn't even been processed. I have my sources, he says mysteriously, though we both know it's probably Sophie, who can never contain good news. The question is, are you comfortable with the decision? I made the decision, Michael. Obviously, I'm comfortable with it. Making a decision and being emotionally reconciled to it are different things, he points out with his characteristic directness. Professionally, it makes perfect sense. Taylor's contributions have been exceptional, the team respects him, and the DoD loves him. But personally, that's more complicated. My personal feelings don't factor into business decisions, I insist. Michael's skeptical silence speaks volumes. Finally, he says, Look, I'm not questioning your professional judgment. I'm checking on my friend, who once had her professional dreams shattered and heartbroken by the same man she just promoted. His bluntness momentarily strips away my CEO facade, leaving the more vulnerable Olivia exposed. It's been 5 years, Michael. Ancient history. Time doesn't automatically heal wounds, Liv. especially ones that were never properly addressed. He pauses. Have you ever actually talked to him about what happened? Not as CEO and employee, but as Olivia and Nathan? What would be the point? I ask, genuinely puzzled by the suggestion. We have a working relationship now. Dredging up the past would only complicate things. Or maybe it would provide the closure you've never really had, he suggests gently. Just something to consider. After we hang up, I find myself distracted by Michael's suggestion. The idea of having a personal conversation with Nathan about our shared history seems not only unnecessary but potentially counterproductive. We've established a functional professional dynamic. Why risk disrupting it with emotional excavation? Yet, as the day progresses, the thought lingers, an unwelcome companion to my usual strategic considerations. Is there unfinished business between Nathan and me that's subtly influencing my professional decisions? Am I being unfair to him, or perhaps too lenient, because of our personal history? These questions are still circling in my mind that evening when Marcus calls with unexpected news. Thought you should know. There's been a security incident involving the Nexus project data. Instantly alert, I demand details. What kind of incident? Has anything been compromised? Not a breach, Marcus clarifies quickly. An attempted unauthorized access. Someone tried to use Taylor's credentials to access the quantum encryption specifications around 7 p.m., after he'd already left the building. Where was Nathan at the time? I ask, immediately calculating possibilities. At the downtown Marriott, in a meeting with the DoD procurement team. We've already verified his location through security footage and multiple witnesses. So someone specifically targeted his access credentials. I conclude, the implications troubling. What level of access did they attempt to obtain? That's the interesting part, Marcus says. They weren't after the top-level security protocols. They targeted the personnel files associated with the Nexus project team. This is unexpected. Personnel files would be of limited value for technical espionage, but might be useful for social engineering or identifying potential insider threats. Have you informed Nathan? I ask. Not yet. I wanted to brief you first and get your direction on next steps. I consider the options carefully. Place a temporary security lock on his credentials while we investigate. Don't inform him until morning. I want to see if there are any additional attempts overnight when the perpetrator might think we haven't noticed yet. Already done, Marcus confirms, and I've activated enhanced monitoring on all Nexus-related access points. Good. I'll come in early tomorrow. Set up a security briefing for 7 a.m. with the core team. After hanging up, I spend several hours reviewing Ascendant's security logs, looking for patterns or anomalies that might explain the attempted breach. Nothing obvious emerges, which is both reassuring and concerning. A sophisticated attacker would leave minimal traces, making detection and attribution more challenging. By morning, the picture has become clearer, but no less troubling. Overnight monitoring revealed 2 additional attempted access events, both targeting Nathan's credentials, from different IP addresses. Each attempt focused on personnel records rather than technical specifications. The 7 a.m. security briefing includes only 4 people: myself, Marcus, our Chief Information Security Officer Raj Patel, and Sophie. Nathan is deliberately excluded while we assess the situation. The pattern suggests a targeted campaign against Taylor specifically, Raj explains, displaying the access logs on the conference room screen. 3 distinct attempts, all using sophisticated methods to mask their origin, all focused on his credentials. Any connection to his ex-wife? I ask. The timing of her appearance at Ascendant and the subsequent security incidents too coincidental to ignore. Nothing direct, Marcus responds. But we're investigating possible connections. The methods used suggest professional-level skills, not an angry ex-spouse acting alone. Unless she hired someone, Sophie points out. If she believes Nathan is hiding assets or income, she might have engaged a professional to gather evidence. That would be extraordinarily reckless, I observe. Corporate espionage carries serious legal consequences, regardless of the motivation. People do desperate things when they feel wronged, Marcus notes, particularly in contentious divorces. The discussion continues, exploring various scenarios and response options. We agree on immediate security measures, changing all of Nathan's access credentials, implementing enhanced authentication protocols for the entire Nexus team, and conducting discrete background verification on recent contacts with both Nathan and the project. When do we tell Taylor? Sophie asks as the meeting concludes. I'll inform him personally after this meeting, I decide. His reaction may provide additional insight into potential connections. The others leave to implement our security protocols while I prepare for what promises to be a difficult conversation. If Nathan has any knowledge of or connection to the attempted breach, his reaction to the news should reveal it. Nathan's brow furrows as he processes this information, quickly connecting dots that most wouldn't see. This wasn't about industrial espionage or technical theft, he concludes quietly. This was personal. Explain, I demand, watching his reaction carefully. He meets my gaze directly. Someone trying to access personnel files rather than technical specifications isn't after Ascendant's intellectual property. They're after information about people. His expression darkens. Specifically, information about me and my connections within the project. You think you were the target, not just the access point? Marcus clarifies. Yes, Nathan confirms. And given recent events, I have a theory about who might be behind it. Your ex-wife, I suggest, having already reached the same conclusion. Nathan nods grimly. Diane hired a private investigator during our divorce proceedings. I wouldn't put this past her resources or determination. Corporate espionage is a serious criminal offense, I remind him, far beyond the bounds of typical divorce tactics. Diana isn't thinking rationally right now, Nathan explains, running a hand through his hair in evident frustration. When she visited last week, she was convinced I've been hiding assets and income potential, specifically mentioning the Nexus advisory role. If she's feeding that paranoia with bad advice from her new attorney. We need evidence, not speculation, Marcus interjects. For now, we've implemented enhanced security protocols. All your credentials have been reset, and additional authentication measures are being applied to the entire Nexus team. I should step down from the project, Nathan says abruptly, surprising both of us. If I'm the security vulnerability. That's premature, I interrupt, unexpectedly finding myself arguing against his voluntary withdrawal. We don't have confirmation that your ex-wife is involved, and removing our lead encryption specialist in the middle of DoD negotiations would create more problems than it solves. Nathan looks genuinely conflicted. I don't want to jeopardize Ascendant's relationship with the Department of Defense. Then help us address the security concern properly, I tell him. Give Marcus all the information you have about your ex-wife, her resources, connections, technical capabilities, everyone she might potentially engage for something like this. Of course, he agrees immediately. I'll provide complete details. Additionally, I continue, you'll need to inform the Nexus Advisory Board about the security incident. Not all details, but enough to explain the enhanced protocols we're implementing. Nathan nods, accepting this responsibility without hesitation. I'll draft a security briefing for General Morris immediately and coordinate with Marcus on appropriate disclosure levels. His willingness to take ownership of the situation, to face potentially uncomfortable scrutiny from the DoD rather than deflecting or minimizing, is yet another departure from the Nathan I once knew. One more thing, I add. Until this situation is resolved, all your project work will need additional oversight. It's not a reflection on your performance or trustworthiness, just a necessary security precaution. I understand completely, he assures me. Whatever protocols you deem necessary, I'll comply without question. After Nathan leaves with Marcus to begin security debriefing, I find myself contemplating this latest complication. The attempted breach creates legitimate concerns about Nathan's continued involvement with sensitive projects, yet his reaction to the news suggested genuine surprise and appropriate concern rather than guilt or evasion. Throughout the day, Nathan cooperates fully with our security team, providing detailed information about his ex-wife and voluntarily surrendering his personal devices for examination. By evening, our technical analysis confirms that the intrusion attempts originated from a cybersecurity firm in Chicago, a company that, according to Nathan, was previously hired by Diane's attorney during their divorce proceedings. Marcus delivers this update in person, his expression suggesting additional complications. We've confirmed the connection to Taylor's ex-wife, but there's more to the story. The cybersecurity firm in question has legitimate government contracts. They're not just private investigators. What kind of government contracts? I ask immediately. Alert to potential implications for our DoD relationship. Mostly Treasury Department and SEC work, Marcus explains. Financial fraud investigations, asset tracing, that sort of thing. The connection clicks immediately. They're not just looking for evidence in a divorce case, they're investigating Nathan for potential financial improprieties. That's my assessment, Marcus agrees. The focus on personnel files makes more sense. In that context, they're looking for evidence of undisclosed relationships, hidden financial arrangements, possible conflicts of interest. This development shifts the entire situation. What initially seemed like a vindictive ex-spouse might actually be something more serious. Have you shared this assessment with Nathan? Not yet, Marcus replies. I wanted your direction first, given the potential implications. I consider the options carefully. If Nathan is under investigation for financial irregularities, Ascendant needs to maintain appropriate distance to protect our corporate interests and DoD relationship. However, acting precipitously without confirmation could damage Nathan's reputation unfairly and potentially disrupt our Nexus project unnecessarily. Arrange a meeting with Nathan first thing tomorrow, I instruct Marcus. We'll present the information and gauge his reaction before determining next steps. That evening, rather than heading home, I find myself working late in my office, reviewing Nathan's complete employment file and security clearance documentation. Everything appears meticulously in order, all financial disclosures complete, all potential conflicts appropriately noted, all previous employment verified. If Nathan is hiding something, he's done an exceptional job of covering his tracks. Or perhaps, I consider reluctantly, there's nothing to hide. My contemplation is interrupted by a text from Michael. Jenna says you're still at the office. Dinner? I'm downtown. 20 minutes later, we're seated at a quiet corner table in my preferred Japanese restaurant, sharing excellent sushi and discussing the day's developments. So Taylor's ex-wife might actually be the least of his problems, Michael summarizes after I explain the situation. If he's under federal investigation for financial irregularities, that's a whole different level of complication. We don't know that for certain, I caution. The connection to a firm with government contracts is suggestive, but not definitive. Michael studies me over his sack cup. You're defending him. That's new. I'm being precise, I correct him. Making assumptions without sufficient evidence would be premature and potentially damaging to both Nathan and Ascendant. Fair enough, Michael concedes. But the question remains, how do you handle it? If Taylor is under investigation, his role in the Nexus project becomes problematic, regardless of his technical contributions. I'm aware of the implications, I acknowledge. We'll address them appropriately once we have more information. And if he denies any knowledge of an investigation, Michael presses. Financial investigations often proceed without the subject's awareness, at least initially. Then we'll need to make a risk assessment based on incomplete information. I admit the prospect uncomfortable but unavoidable. The protection of Ascendant and our contractual obligations remains the priority. Michael nods, accepting this professional stance. then shifts to a more personal question. And how do you feel about all this, Liv? Not as CEO, but as someone with history with the guy. The query catches me off guard, forcing me to consider emotional dimensions I've deliberately set aside. How I feel is irrelevant to the situation at hand. Bullshit, Michael responds mildly. Your feelings about Nathan, trust, distrust, lingering resentment, grudging respect, they color every decision you make regarding him. Pretending otherwise doesn't make it less true. His bluntness is both irritating and oddly liberating. Fine. I feel conflicted. The Nathan I've observed these past months seems genuinely changed from the one I knew before. His work has been exemplary, his teamwork collaborative, his communication transparent. I pause, considering deeper truths. But part of me still waits for the other shoe to drop, for the ambitious, self-serving Nathan to emerge and confirm that my initial wariness was justified. And if that never happens, Michael asks gently, if he's actually grown into someone better than the person who hurt you? Then I'll have to recalibrate my understanding accordingly, I respond, the admission more difficult than it should be. But that's a professional assessment, not a personal reconciliation. Michael wisely chooses not to push further, steering our conversation to lighter topics for the remainder of dinner. By the time we part ways, I've regained my emotional equilibrium, ready to face tomorrow's challenging conversation with Nathan. The morning arrives with new complications. Emma intercepts me as I enter, her expression suggesting urgent developments. Marcus called. Nathan Taylor is already here, arrived at 6 a.m. with his attorney. This is unexpected. His attorney? Corporate counsel from Perkins Coie, Emma elaborates. They're waiting in the small conference room. Marcus is with them. The presence of high-powered legal representation shifts the dynamics considerably. Either Nathan anticipates serious allegations, or he's already aware of the potential investigation. Neither scenario suggests the transparency he's promised. When I enter the conference room, the atmosphere is tense but controlled. Nathan rises immediately, his expression a complex mix of determination and regret. Beside him sits an older woman in an impeccable charcoal suit, her silver hair cut in a severe bob, clearly the attorney Emma mentioned. Ms. Chen, Nathan begins, thank you for seeing us on such short notice. This is Patricia Winters, my corporate counsel. I acknowledge the attorney with a professional nod. I wasn't aware we'd scheduled a legal discussion this morning. We haven't, Nathan confirms. But given the developments Marcus shared with me late last night regarding the security incident, I felt it prudent to have proper representation for this conversation. Marcus, seated at the far end of the table, gives me a slight nod. Apparently, he decided to brief Nathan on our suspicions despite my instructions to wait. I make a mental note to address this deviation later. I see, I respond neutrally, taking a seat at the head of the table. And what exactly do you believe requires legal representation, Mr. Taylor? The attorney intervenes smoothly. My client has become aware that certain investigative activities targeting him may have implications. For his role at Ascendant Technologies, we're here to provide complete transparency and appropriate legal assurances. I'm listening, I tell them, maintaining my composed demeanor despite the unexpected turn of events. Nathan leans forward, his gaze direct and unwavering. The cybersecurity firm that attempted to access Ascendant's systems is indeed connected to my ex-wife, but not in the way we initially assumed. Diane's brother works for the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN. She apparently convinced him that I've been hiding assets and income, potentially involving my role with the Nexus project. Are you under federal investigation, Mr. Taylor? I ask plainly. Not officially, his attorney interjects. What we're dealing with appears to be unauthorized use of federal resources for personal purposes, specifically, Mr. Taylor's brother-in-law inappropriately engaging a government contractor to conduct what amounts to a personal vendetta on his sister's behalf. We've already filed formal complaints with the Treasury Department's Inspector General and the SEC's Ethics Office. Nathan adds. The activity was clearly unauthorized and potentially criminal on their part. I processed this information carefully, comparing it against our security team's findings. And you have evidence to support this characterization? Patricia Winters produces a folder, sliding it across the table. Complete documentation, including communications between Diane Taylor, her brother James Keene at FinCEN, and Axiom Cybersecurity, the contractor that attempted to access your systems. I review the documents, which appear to substantiate their explanation. How did you obtain these communications? I ask, noting the private email exchanges and text messages that normal discovery processes wouldn't typically reveal. I hired my own investigators when Diane began making threats about exposing my financial situation, Nathan explains. They've been monitoring her communications, legally through proper channels, he adds quickly. When Marcus informed me about the connection to Axiom, I immediately recognized the significance and had my team compile all relevant evidence. The thoroughness of his preparation is impressive, as is his proactive approach to addressing the situation. Rather than waiting for accusations, he's brought forward comprehensive information that contextualizes the security incident and potentially clears his name. This is helpful information, I acknowledge, but it still leaves us with a serious security breach attempt targeting Ascendant systems. Absolutely. Nathan agrees without hesitation. And I take full responsibility for the fact that my personal situation created this vulnerability. If you believe my continued involvement with Nexus presents unacceptable risk to Ascendant, I'll step down immediately. His willingness to put Ascendant's interests above his own career advancement represents perhaps the most significant departure from the Nathan Thar once knew. The man sitting across from me now seems genuinely committed to principles larger than personal ambition. That won't be necessary at this point, I decide after careful consideration. However, we will need to disclose this situation to General Morris and the Nexus security team. They'll want assurances that appropriate measures are in place to prevent future incidents. I've already drafted a comprehensive security disclosure, Nathan says, nodding to his attorney, who produces another document. Complete transparency about the situation, the underlying personal conflict, and the steps I'm taking to resolve it permanently. I review the disclosure, finding it thorough and appropriately forthcoming without unnecessarily detailed personal information. This is well done, I acknowledge. With some minor adjustments from our legal team, this should satisfy DoD requirements. There's one additional matter, Patricia Winters interjects. Given the sensitivity of the Nexus project and the potential for continued interference from Ms. Taylor and her brother, we believe a restraining order is appropriate. We've prepared the necessary filings and wanted to make Ascendant aware before proceeding. This development suggests Nathan is taking the situation even more seriously than I anticipated. A formal restraining order would create legal consequences for any further attempts by his ex-wife to access Ascendant systems or interfere with his professional responsibilities. Proceed with the restraining order, I approve. Ascendant's legal team will coordinate with you to ensure our security interests are properly represented. The meeting concludes with clear action items and responsibilities assigned. As Nathan and his attorney prepare to leave, I ask him to remain behind for a brief private conversation. Patricia Winters departs with Marcus, who will coordinate the security adjustments necessary to address the situation. Once we're alone, I observe Nathan more carefully, noting the subtle signs of strain beneath his composed exterior, slight shadows under his eyes, tension around his mouth, a certain rigidity in his posture that suggests nights of minimal sleep and constant stress. How long have you known about your brother-in-law's involvement? I ask directly. I suspected something 3 weeks ago, when Diane mentioned during an argument that I couldn't hide my finances from her brother's government friends, Nathan admits. I hired investigators the next day, but only received confirmation about Axiom's involvement yesterday evening, after Marcus shared their findings with me. Why didn't you bring these concerns to our attention sooner? I challenge him. You promised absolute transparency, yet you conducted a parallel investigation without informing Ascendant's security team. Nathan accepts the criticism without defensiveness. You're right. I should have shared my suspicions immediately. He runs a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of stress I remember from years ago. The truth is, I was embarrassed. My personal life was creating potential problems for Ascendant, and I wanted to resolve the situation quietly before it became a corporate issue. That's exactly the kind of unilateral decision-making that concerns me, I point out. You decided what information was relevant to share, rather than allowing Ascendant's security protocols to make that determination. Fair assessment, he acknowledges. It won't happen again. From now on, any concerns, suspicions, or relevant personal developments will be reported immediately, regardless of my personal discomfort. I study him for a moment longer, weighing his sincerity against past experience. Your ex-wife's actions have created legitimate security concerns, Nathan. Even with a restraining order in place, the fact that she was able to leverage government connections for personal vendettas raises questions about your continued involvement with classified projects. I understand, he says quietly. If you want me to step back from Nexus, I accept that decision. His ready acceptance of potential professional consequences stands in stark contrast to the ambitious, position-focused Nathan I remember. Whether this represents genuine growth or strategic accommodation remains uncertain, but his actions throughout this crisis have consistently prioritized Ascendant's interests over his own. For now, you'll remain on the project with enhanced supervision, I decide. General Morris will make the final determination after reviewing our security disclosure and your restraining order documentation. Thank you for the opportunity to address this properly, Nathan says, rising to leave. At the door, he pauses. Olivia, Ms. Chen, I want you to know that I understand the position my personal complications have put you in. 5 years ago, I would have hidden these issues, possibly endangering the company in the process. The fact that you've handled this with such professionalism despite our history. He hesitates, vulnerability flickering across his face. It reminds me daily of what I lost when I walked away. The unexpected confession hangs in the air between us. For a moment, I'm transported back to that final confrontation in our shared office, when he'd dismissed my concerns about his increasingly unethical business practices, when he'd looked me in the eye and said those words that had fueled 5 years of determination. Face reality, Olivia. You'll be nothing without me. Now, standing in my office, CEO of the company he'd begged to join, the irony isn't lost on either of us. We all make choices, Nathan, I say finally. We live with their consequences. He nods, accepting the measured response for what it is. Neither forgiveness nor continued condemnation, simply acknowledgement of our shared reality. For what it's worth, he says quietly. Watching you build Ascendant, seeing what you've created here. It's been humbling. You've surpassed anything I could have imagined. Before I can formulate a response to this unexpected admission, he's gone. The door, closing softly behind him. I remain at my desk for several minutes, processing the conversation and its implications. Nathan's willingness to take full responsibility for his personal complications and their professional repercussions represents a level of maturity I wouldn't have attributed to him based on our previous relationship. The question remains, is this growth genuine or merely an adaptation to changed circumstances? The days that follow bring a flurry of activity. Nathan's restraining order against his ex-wife is granted, creating legal consequences for any further attempts to access Ascendant's systems or interfere with his professional responsibilities. The DoD reviews our security disclosure and, after a thorough assessment, allows Nathan to continue his role on the Nexus project with enhanced oversight protocols. Most surprisingly, Nathan's brother-in-law is placed on administrative leave pending, an investigation into misuse of federal resources, a development that validates Nathan's explanation and suggests the situation was indeed more complex than a typical divorce dispute. Michael, always attuned to the undercurrents of Ascendant's internal dynamics, invites me to dinner 3 weeks after the security incident. Over excellent steaks at his favorite restaurant, he gets straight to the point. "So, Taylor's looking pretty vindicated these days," he observes, cutting into his ribeye. "The brother-in-law suspended, the ex-wife legally restrained, the DOD keeping him on the project. Quite the reversal of fortune." The evidence supported his explanation, I acknowledged neutrally. We responded accordingly. Michael studies me over his wine glass. "And how's our fearless CEO feeling about all this? Still waiting for the other shoe to drop?" I consider the question seriously. Less so than before, I admit. His handling of the situation was impressive, transparent, proactive, prioritizing Ascendant's interests above his own. Almost like he's a different person than the one who walked out on you 5 years ago, Michael suggests carefully. Or perhaps just a more mature version of the same person, I counter. People evolve, Michael. Circumstances shape us. Some more dramatically than others, he agrees, setting down his fork. You know, Jenna mentioned something interesting the other day. She ran into Nathan at that charity gala for Children's Hospital, the one you skipped to finish the quarterly projections. This is news to me. Nathan was at the hospital gala? Michael nods. Apparently he's been volunteering there for the past few years. Works with kids in the oncology ward, teaching them coding basics as a distraction during treatment. Jenna says he's quite beloved there. Not something you'd fake for professional advancement. The information is jarring, completely incongruous, with my understanding of Nathan's character. The man I knew was relentlessly career-focused, viewing charitable work as a necessary public relations exercise rather than a genuine calling. People can surprise you, I say non-committally, unwilling to reveal how deeply this revelation has unsettled my perspective. Indeed they can, Michael agrees easily. Speaking of surprises, Sophie mentioned Taylor's turned down 3 headhunting attempts in the past month, including one from Blackstone Tech with an offer nearly double his current salary. Again, this contradicts my expectations. The Nathan I knew would have leveraged such offers immediately, either to negotiate a better position at Ascendant or to jump ship for greater advancement opportunities. Perhaps he values stability after his recent career turbulence, I suggest, searching for a pragmatic explanation. Or maybe he values being at Ascendant specifically, Michael counters, working with the company's brilliant, if somewhat emotionally guarded, CEO. I give him a warning look. Don't start, Michael. He raises his hands in mock surrender. Just making an observation. The man could be making twice his current salary elsewhere, yet he's staying put and working 18-hour days on the Nexus project. Makes one wonder about his motivations. I change the subject deliberately, steering our conversation toward Ascendant's upcoming international expansion. Michael allows the pivot, though his knowing expression suggests he's made his point. That night, unable to sleep, I find myself reviewing Nathan's personnel file again, this time focusing not on security concerns or performance metrics, but on the more human elements, the volunteer work listed in his biography, the personal references I'd never bothered to contact, the pattern of community involvement that had begun approximately 3 years ago, roughly a year after our professional split. Something had changed for Nathan around that time, something significant enough to redirect his previously self-centered focus toward others. What had happened in that intervening year to catalyze such a transformation? The question lingers as I finally drift into sleep, accompanied by fragments of memories from our early partnership, the genuine excitement of shared discovery, the late-night strategy sessions fueled by Chinese takeout and complementary perspectives, the brief period when we'd been a formidable team before ambition and insecurity had corroded our foundation. The following week brings the final negotiations, for the DoD contract, a critical milestone for Ascendant's growth strategy. The meeting includes General Morris, Colonel Chen, our executive team, and key technical personnel, including Nathan, whose expertise with the quantum encryption modules has made him indispensable to the project despite the recent security complications. The TEI negotiations proceed smoothly until an unexpected technical objection from one of the DoD's cybersecurity specialists threatens to derail the entire agreement. The concern centers on potential vulnerabilities in our authentication protocols when deployed across multiple security domains, a complex challenge that requires immediate resolution. Nathan steps forward, requesting permission to address the concern. What follows is a masterclass in technical problem-solving and diplomatic communication. He acknowledges the validity of the objection, outlines several potential approaches to mitigate the vulnerability, and collaboratively develops a solution that satisfies the DoD's security requirements without compromising Ascendant's core technology architecture. By the meeting's conclusion, not only has the obstacle been overcome, but General Morris seems more impressed with our team than ever. "That's the kind of adaptive problem-solving we need," he tells me as we walk toward the elevators. Taylor's ability to bridge theoretical security models with practical implementation challenges is exceptional. "You've built a remarkable team, Ms. Chen." "Thank you, General," I respond, professional pride momentarily overshadowing personal complications. Ascendant values both technical excellence and collaborative problem-solving. "Values I've observed consistently in your organization," he agrees. "It's precisely why we're moving forward with this partnership." Later that afternoon, with the contract negotiations successfully concluded, a spontaneous celebration breaks out in the AI security division. Sophie opens champagne, team members exchange congratulations, and the months of intensive work culminate in well-deserved recognition. I make a brief appearance, offering measured praise for the team's accomplishments while maintaining the professional distance appropriate for a CEO. As I prepare to return to my office, Nathan approaches, his expression reflecting the day's success tempered by appropriate professional boundaries. "Congratulations," I tell him, acknowledging his particular contributions to the successful negotiation. "Your handling of the authentication protocol concerns was effective." "Thank you," he replies. "It was a team effort. June's theoretical framework made the solution possible." His reflexive attribution of credit to colleagues is yet another departure from past patterns. The Nathan I knew would have centered his own contributions, positioning himself as the indispensable problem solver. "Nevertheless," I continue, "your ability to translate complex technical concepts for non-specialists was crucial to resolving the impasse." He accepts this more specific praise with a nod. The Nexus project represents an incredible opportunity for Ascendant. I'm grateful to be part of it. There's a moment of awkward silence, both of us aware of the personal undercurrents beneath our professional interaction, yet equally committed to maintaining appropriate boundaries. "Your probationary evaluation mentioned potential expansion of your role in the AI security division," I say finally. "Given your contributions to the DoD negotiations and the resolution of recent security concerns, I've approved Sophie's recommendation for your promotion to senior technical lead, effective next month." Surprise flickers across his face. "I appreciate the opportunity," he says carefully, "especially given the complications my personal situation created for Ascendant." "Those complications have been addressed appropriately," I reply. "The promotion reflects your technical contributions and team leadership, nothing more or less." He nods, accepting the professional framework I've established. "Thank you, I won't let you down." As he returns to the celebration, I notice Sophie watching our interaction with undisguised curiosity. Her expression suggests questions she's too professional to ask directly, but is clearly considering. The gentle scrutiny reminds me that regardless of our efforts to maintain strictly professional dynamics, the history between Nathan and me hasn't gone unnoticed by our more perceptive colleagues. That evening, as I'm preparing to leave, Emma delivers an unexpected message. Nathan Taylor asked if you might have 5 minutes before you go. He says it's regarding a personal matter, not a work issue. The request is unusual. Nathan has been scrupulously respectful of professional boundaries since joining Ascendant. Whatever prompted this departure from established patterns must be significant. Tell him I'll see him in the small conference room, I decide, curious despite my reservations about blurring professional and personal lines. Nathan is waiting when I arrive, standing by the window overlooking Seattle's evening skyline. He turns as I enter, his expression suggesting uncertainty about my response to his unusual request. "Thank you for seeing me," he begins. I know this falls outside our normal professional interaction. Emma mentioned it was a personal matter, I observe, remaining near the door rather than taking a seat. He nods, taking a deep breath before continuing. I received news today that made me reflect on our shared history. My father passed away early this morning. The information catches me off guard. I'd met Nathan's father several times during our relationship, a difficult man whose approval Nathan had constantly sought but rarely received. His death represents the severing of a complex emotional connection that had significantly shaped Nathan's ambitions and insecurities. "I'm sorry for your loss," I say, the conventional response feeling inadequate but necessary. "Thank you," he acknowledges. Our relationship was complicated, but his death has prompted some reflection that I felt I needed to share with you. He pauses, choosing his words carefully. When I left our partnership 5 years ago, I made that decision from a place of fear and insecurity, traits I'd inherited from him without recognizing their destructive potential. This direct reference to our shared past crosses the carefully maintained boundary we've established since his employment at Ascendant. Under normal circumstances, I would redirect the conversation to more professional topics, but the exceptional nature of his loss and the evident significance of what he's trying to communicate gives me pause. "Nathan, this isn't necessary." I begin, uncertain where the conversation is heading. "It is," he insists gently. "Not for you, perhaps, but for me. My father died believing that success was measured by position, influence, and financial status. It's why he was so disappointed when I lost everything after TechVision collapsed, not because I'd failed, but because I'd lost the external markers of success he valued." He turns back toward the window, gathering his thoughts. "Working at Ascendant these past months, seeing what you've built here, not just the technology, but the culture of innovation and collaboration, I've realized how completely wrong I was back then. About business, about success." He faces me, again, his expression reflecting hard-won insight. "About you." The simple acknowledgement hangs between us, carrying the weight of 5 years of unspoken history. "What I said to you that day," he continues, "about you being nothing without me, it was the single most arrogant, incorrect statement I've ever made. The evidence of that is all around us in these offices. You've created something extraordinary, Olivia, something I couldn't have envisioned, much less achieved on my own." The direct apology, delivered without expectation of forgiveness or reconciliation, carries a sincerity that would have been unimaginable from the Nathan I knew 5 years ago. "Thank you for saying that," I respond, surprised by how much the acknowledgement means after all this time. "I hope it brings you some peace." "It's not about finding peace," he clarifies. "It's about acknowledging truth. My father died without ever recognizing or admitting his mistakes. I don't want to repeat that pattern." He glances at his watch, signaling an awareness of the time he's taken. "That's all I wanted to say. I appreciate you listening." As he moves toward the door, I find myself asking a question that's lingered since our earliest interactions at Ascendant. "Why did you apply here, Nathan? With your experience, even after the setbacks, you could have found positions at dozens of companies without our complicated history." He considers the question thoughtfully before responding. Initially, because Ascendant was doing the most innovative work in quantum encryption, and I wanted to be part of that. A rueful smile touches his lips. I had no idea you were the founder and CEO until that first interview. And after you knew? I press, genuinely curious about his motivation for accepting a position far below his previous professional level, working under the woman he'd once dismissed so completely. After I knew, he says quietly, I saw it as an opportunity to make amends through actions rather than words. Not to erase the past or expect forgiveness, but to demonstrate through daily choices that I'd learned from my mistakes. He shrugs, slightly. Whether that's redemption or just stubborn determination is probably a matter of perspective. The candid answer reflects a self-awareness that the Nathan I knew would have considered unnecessary introspection. Something significant changed him during the years between our professional separation and his arrival at Ascendant, something beyond mere career setbacks. What happened, Nathan? I ask directly. After Tech Vision, after we... I pause, recalibrating. Something changed you. What was it? He hesitates, clearly weighing how much to share. Many things contributed. He begins slowly. Professional failures, certainly. The divorce. But the catalyst was probably the cancer diagnosis. Cancer? The revelation startles me. Nothing in his employment records or medical disclosures mentioned a serious illness. 3 years ago, he confirms. Stage 3 lymphoma, aggressive treatment protocol, uncertain prognosis. It has a way of clarifying what matters and what doesn't. He notes my expression and adds quickly, I'm in remission now. Have been for 2 years. All follow-up evaluations have been clear. The information reorganizes my understanding of his trajectory. The gap in his employment history, the shift toward volunteer work, the fundamental recalibration of priorities that cancer often forces upon survivors. I didn't include it in my medical disclosure because it's resolved and doesn't affect my current health status or ability to perform my job, he explains. But it's the answer to your question about what changed me. Nothing quite recalibrates. Your perspective like facing your own mortality. I can imagine, I acknowledge, though in truth, I can only intellectually grasp the profound impact such an experience must have had. Anyway, he concludes, moving toward the door. Thank you again for listening. I'll be taking a few personal days next week for my father's funeral, but the Nexus implementation timeline won't be affected. Take whatever time you need, I tell him. The professional response automatic but sincere. Family matters take priority. After he leaves, I remain in the conference room, processing the conversation and its implications. The Nathan who just shared his cancer diagnosis and acknowledged, his past arrogance bears little resemblance to the man who walked away from our partnership 5 years ago. Whether that transformation stems from illness, professional setbacks, or genuine personal growth is perhaps less important than the evidence of change itself. As I finally gather my things and head toward the elevator, Michael's earlier words echo in my thoughts. At some point, you have to decide if you're evaluating his current behavior or punishing him for past actions. The distinction has become increasingly difficult to maintain as evidence of Nathan's transformation accumulates. From his handling of the security breach, to his contributions to the Nexus project, to the revelation of his cancer battle, each piece of information challenges my carefully maintained narrative about who he is and what motivates him. 2 days later, I find myself in my office late in the evening, reviewing the finalized DoD contract when Emma interrupts with an unusual request. Nathan Taylor left something for you, she explains, placing a small package on my desk. He said it wasn't urgent and to give it to you when you had a moment. The package is simply wrapped in brown paper, my name written in Nathan's distinctive handwriting across the top. After Emma leaves, I open it carefully, unsure what to expect. Inside is a weathered manila folder containing what appears to be original sketches and notes. Our earliest collaborative work on quantum encryption architectures, dating back to the lake house weekend that Nathan had referenced during our technical discussions. Paperclipped to the folder is a handwritten note. Olivia, these belong with you. They were always more your vision than mine, though I was too arrogant to acknowledge that at the time. Your implementation at Ascendant has exceeded anything we imagined that weekend, proving definitively whose insight was the true driving force. I've made digital copies for my reference, but the originals should be with their rightful creator. Thank you for the second chance I didn't deserve. Nathan, the gesture is unexpected and oddly moving, a tangible acknowledgement of creative contribution that Nathan had once dismissed when we parted ways. Looking through the sketches, I'm transported back to that weekend when our professional synergy had been at its peak, before ego and ambition had corroded our partnership. Tucked behind the technical diagrams is something I'd forgotten entirely. A candid photo of us working side by side, heads bent over the scattered papers, expressions animated with shared excitement. I can't remember who took it, perhaps the cabin's caretaker when he'd stopped by with additional firewood, but it captures a moment of genuine collaborative joy that had been lost in the subsequent bitterness of our separation. The photo and documents present a complicated emotional challenge. For years, I've maintained a carefully constructed narrative about Nathan, ambitious, self-serving, willing to sacrifice others for personal advancement. This framework has been convenient, allowing me to categorize our history neatly and move forward without the messier work of nuanced reassessment. Yet the evidence before me suggests a more complex truth. The Nathan who returned these documents with such a humble note seems fundamentally different from the man who once told me I'd be nothing without him. Whether that transformation is genuine or strategic remains uncertain, but the possibility that people, even those who have hurt us profoundly, can change is increasingly difficult to dismiss. The following week brings Nathan's brief absence for his father's funeral, during which the Nexus project continues smoothly under Sophie's direction. Upon his return, he resumes his duties with characteristic thoroughness, focusing particularly on integrating the authentication protocol modifications developed during the final DoD negotiations. One afternoon, approximately 3 weeks after our conversation about his father, I encounter Nathan in an unexpected context. Having skipped lunch due to back-to-back meetings, I decide to take a rare mid-afternoon break at the small cafe in our building's atrium. As I approach, I spot Nathan seated at a corner table, deep in conversation with a young woman I don't immediately recognize. Their interaction appears serious, her expression concerned, his patient and supportive. It's only as I order my coffee that I realize she's one of our junior engineers, recently hired from MIT's quantum computing program. Rather than interrupting or finding another location, I take a seat at a table partially obscured by decorative foliage, allowing me to observe without being immediately visible. The choice feels vaguely unprofessional, yet my curiosity about this unguarded version of Nathan prevails over proper CEO decorum. Their conversation becomes occasionally audible between the cafe's ambient sounds, enough to discern that they're discussing a technical challenge the young engineer is facing with quantum decoherence modeling. Nathan listens intently, asking clarifying questions rather than immediately offering solutions, guiding her toward her own insights rather than imposing his expertise. It's mentorship in its purest form, generous, patient, ego-free, and completely at odds with the Nathan who once dismissed junior team members as technical support staff rather than meaningful contributors. As their discussion concludes, Nathan offers concrete suggestions for resources and approaches, promising to review her revised models when she's ready. The young engineer leaves looking noticeably more confident, her initial frustration replaced by renewed determination. Before I can decide whether to acknowledge my presence or quietly depart, Nathan turns slightly, noticing me despite the partial concealment. A flicker of surprise crosses his face, followed by a questioning look, clearly wondering how long I've been observing. Rather than pretending the encounter is coincidental, I gather my coffee and approach his table. "That was good advice about the decoherence modeling," I comment, indicating the direction the young engineer had departed. "Lisa has tremendous potential but struggles with confidence." "She's brilliant," Nathan agrees readily. "Just needs reassurance that hitting obstacles is part of the development process, not evidence of inadequacy." The observation is insightful and surprisingly empathetic, qualities I wouldn't have associated with the Nathan I knew 5 years ago, who tended to view technical challenges as binary indicators of capability rather than developmental opportunities. "Mind if I join you?" I ask, the request surprising us both. "Please," he responds, gesturing to the chair across from him. For a moment, neither of us speaks, the unusual nature of this casual interaction outside our carefully maintained professional framework creating momentary awkwardness. "Thank you for returning the lake house materials," I say finally, acknowledging his gesture for the first time. I'd forgotten how much ground we covered that weekend. "It was a productive 48 hours, he agrees with a slight smile. Though I suspect the theoretical framework would have evolved more quickly without my insistence on premature commercialization considerations. The self-critical assessment of his past approach is unexpected. The commercial perspective wasn't without value, I find myself acknowledging. My theoretical models benefited from your practical implementation questions. He looks genuinely surprised by this concession. That's generous of you to say, considering how things ended. The reference to our professional dissolution hangs between us, neither fully addressed nor entirely avoided. For the first time since Nathan joined Ascendant, I consider the possibility of directly discussing our shared history, not as CEO and employee, but as two people who once built and destroyed something together. "I've been thinking about what you said," I begin carefully, "about your father, and the perspective your illness provided." He nods, waiting for me to continue rather than rushing to fill the conversational space. Another departure from his previous communication patterns. "Sometimes I wonder if I've been too rigid in my assessment of you," I admit, the candor feeling simultaneously vulnerable and liberating. "If I've been so committed to a particular narrative that I've missed evidence of genuine change." "That would be understandable," he says quietly. "I gave you every reason to question my character and intentions." "Yes, you did," I agree, not softening the historical reality. "But perhaps I've allowed that history to overshadow present reality longer than is justifiable." He considers this thoughtfully. "May I ask what prompted this reconsideration?" "Multiple things," I acknowledge. "Your handling of the security incident, your contributions to Nexus, your mentorship of junior team members like Lisa." I pause, meeting his gaze directly. "The fact that you've turned down significant offers from competitors to remain at Ascendant." A flicker of surprise crosses his face. "You know about those." "I make it my business to know when other companies attempt to poach my key technical personnel," I reply with a slight smile. "Particularly those with specialized knowledge of proprietary encryption architectures." "I was never going to accept those offers," he says simply. "Because of the Nexus project?" I ask, genuinely curious about his reasoning. He shakes his head slightly. "Because whatever I'm building at this point in my life, I want it to be something meaningful. Ascendant is doing work that matters, not just commercially, but in terms of genuine security innovation. That's worth more than a higher salary or fancier title elsewhere." The perspective represents such a fundamental shift from his previous career approach that I find myself momentarily speechless. The Nathan I knew 5 years ago evaluated opportunities primarily through the lens of advancement and recognition, This focus on meaningful contribution over personal gain suggests a genuinely transformative reassessment of priorities. Cancer has a way of clarifying what matters, he adds, correctly interpreting my silence as surprise. When you're facing the possibility that your professional legacy might be measured in months rather than decades, you start asking different questions about how you want to spend whatever time remains. And now that your prognosis has improved? I ask. The questions remain valid, he says simply. Just because I've been granted more time doesn't mean I should waste it on things that don't ultimately matter. The wisdom in this perspective is undeniable, though I wonder how many of us require such dramatic catalysts to reach similar conclusions. Our conversation continues, gradually shifting from philosophical considerations to more practical discussions of the Nexus implementation challenges. The interaction feels different from our previous professional exchanges, more relaxed, more collaborative, echoing elements of our early partnership before ambition and insecurity had corrupted the foundation. As we finally prepare to return to our respective responsibilities, Nathan pauses, his expression suggesting one final thought. Olivia, I want to be clear about something. I'm not working at Ascendant as some form of penance or seeking personal redemption through professional association with your success. Then why are you here? I ask, returning to my earlier question with new context. Because this is where I can do my best work, he answers simply. Because the mission matters. Because the team is exceptional. He meets my gaze directly. And yes, because working with you, even in our current strictly professional capacity, challenges me to be better than I've ever been, not out of competition or insecurity, but because excellence is the standard you've established throughout this organization. The response reflects a level of self-awareness and genuine professional respect that transcends our complicated history. It suggests the possibility that despite everything that happened between us, there might be a path forward based on shared values and mutual growth, rather than lingering resentment or power dynamics. Thank you for your candor, I tell him, genuinely, appreciative of his straightforward assessment. Thank you for listening, he responds, and for the second chance I'm still working to earn. As we part ways in the atrium, returning to our respective roles within Ascendant's carefully structured hierarchy, I find myself contemplating the long, strange journey that brought us to this moment. From ambitious co-founders to bitter ex-partners, to CEO and employee, each phase of our relationship has been shaped by choices, consequences, and unexpected developments beyond either of our control. The narrative I've maintained about Nathan, and perhaps about myself in relation to him, has served its purpose during Ascendant's growth and my own professional evolution. Yet, as evidence of genuine change accumulates, I wonder if perhaps it's time for a more nuanced understanding of both our shared history and potential future interactions. That evening, as I stand at my penthouse windows watching Seattle's lights illuminate the darkening sky, I reflect on the strange symmetry of our circumstances. 5 years ago, Nathan walked away, convinced I would fail without him. Now, he works diligently within the company I built, contributing value while acknowledging my leadership. The reversal could easily be framed as perfect poetic justice, the ultimate vindication of my capabilities and refutation of his arrogant dismissal. Yet that narrative feels increasingly hollow as I consider the more complex reality of human growth and transformation. Perhaps the true victory isn't in proving Nathan wrong about my potential, but in creating something so meaningful that we've both transcended the people we once were. Him through hard-earned humility and redirected purpose, me through vision and determined execution. The company I've built stands as irrefutable evidence that I never needed Nathan to succeed. Yet the work he's contributing now, as part of the team rather than its self-appointed leader, adds genuine value to Ascendant's mission. There's a certain elegant completion to this arrangement that transcends simple revenge narratives or power reversals. As I turn from the window, my phone buzzes with a message from Michael. Dinner tomorrow? Jenna insists you need to actually eat something that isn't from the Ascendant cafeteria occasionally. I smile at his persistent friendship, typing back, "Fine, but you're picking the restaurant." His response comes immediately. "Already done. La Rustica at 7. And fair warning, we're not talking about work at all." The prospect of an evening without professional considerations is surprisingly appealing. Perhaps there's wisdom in occasional separation from the all-consuming focus on Ascendant's growth and challenges. Placing my phone on the charger, I make a decision that's been gradually forming since my conversation with Nathan in the atrium. Tomorrow, I'll review the lake house materials he returned, not merely as historical artifacts, but as potential foundations for innovation yet to come. The quantum encryption architectures we conceptualized together contained seeds of brilliance that transcended our subsequent personal conflicts. Great ideas deserve development regardless of complicated origins. And perhaps the same is true for people. The potential for growth and transformation exists independently of past mistakes or painful history. Nathan said I'd be nothing without him. He was wrong, but perhaps we can both be something more because of what we've learned since then, separately and now, cautiously, together within the company I built from the ashes of our broken partnership. Not as the people we were, but as the professionals we've become. And there's a certain victory in that evolution that transcends even the sweetest revenge. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.